Chapter 1597. After Zhang Yan gave the order, 10 breaths later, He Xianyin slowly walked in from outside the boat. He sensed He Xianyin and found that compared to before, He Xianyin had gone through a completely different change. Although his mana had not improved significantly, his aura was more ethereal, as if he did not belong to this world. Under normal circumstances, after entering enlightenment, he would still need to cultivate for 30,000 years. Just now was the beginning of avoiding the first trial. After that, a Dharma body would appear in his place to travel the various worlds. He Xianyin had not cultivated to this level yet, so in terms of combat ability, he was not as good as the heavenly lords of the outer worlds. However, there were benefits too. Without Pangli to drag him down, his true body could escape to the heavens beyond heaven at any time and return easily. As long as his mana was not exhausted or he was trapped, his life would not be in danger. Moreover, from now on, even if he did not deliberately cultivate, his mana would continue to grow. In a short while, He Xianyin arrived at the court and said, "Greetings, Perfected One." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "Sit down, Perfected One." He Xianyin silently went to the side and sat down. Zhang Yan asked, "How is your cultivation going?" He Xianyin replied, "Everything is going smoothly." After a pause, he said, "Now that I have succeeded, if there is anything you need me to do, please take care of it." He had already thought it through. Since he had embarked on the path of enlightenment, there was no turning back. There was no hope for the great Tao in this world, but the opportunity was not lost. If he could really enter the main sect through Zhang Yan and his name was recorded in the genealogy, even if it was only a side branch, he could be considered as a junior disciple of the great underworld patriarch. In this way, he might have a chance to start all over again in his next life. Zhang Yan said, "The situation in the Yuhuan heavens is different from before. I believe Perfected One has come out of seclusion for a long time, so you must know that the current battle will determine the future of the heavens. None of the heavenly lords can stay out of it. Now that I am in an alliance with Green Jade Palace, we can help at any time. Perfected One should make preparations first." He Xianyin said, "This one awaits your orders at any time." Zhang Yan continued, "The mysterious flood sky formation will dissipate in a few hundred years. At that time, there will definitely be people who covet it, like those evil demons and ferocious monsters, who will invade. If I am not around, the mysterious flood sky formation will have to rely on you to guard it." He Xianyin said, "Black Red Heaven is the place where the great underworld patriarch passed down his teachings. I have been cultivating here ever since I entered the Tao. I will not allow outsiders to interfere." Zhang Yan nodded slightly. After exchanging a few more words with him, he dismissed him. Then, he left the main hall and came to the front of a spiritual wall. He flicked his finger and a ray of spiritual light was shot out. After a while, a deacon Taoist appeared. When the deacon saw him, he quickly bowed and said, "So it's Zhang Shangzhen." "Greetings." Zhang Yan asked, "Is Elder Peng here?" The deacon Taoist said, "Shangzhen, please wait for a moment. Elder Peng is discussing matters with the perfected ones in the main hall. I will go and inform them now." Not long after, Elder Peng appeared in front of the spiritual wall. He smiled and said, "What a coincidence. I was looking for fellow Taoist Zhang, but you are one step ahead of me." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Is the matter that Elder Peng is referring to related to the Jin Di sect?" Hearing that, Elder Peng nodded and said, "It seems that fellow Taoist has also received news about this sect." Previously, he did not know about the background of the Jin Di sect. It was only recently that he suddenly realized that there was a huge force beside him. This made him extremely shocked. Not only did he give up on the strategy that he had prepared to deal with Yang Yugong and the others, he also had to allocate some manpower to guard against them. He did not want another force to come out when he was fighting with others. Zhang Yan asked, "How does Elder Peng plan to deal with this sect?" Elder Peng said in a low voice, "Previously, the elders in my palace were discussing this matter. All the elders think that this sect cannot be left alive. If the demonic cultivators gain power, there will be no benefits for the people of humanity. However, the main point of the debate is whether to send people to eliminate them now, or to ignore them for now and deal with them after we eliminate Jueyuan heaven. Zhang Yan asked, "What do you think, Elder Peng?" Elder Peng pondered and said, "It is really difficult to make a decision. Currently, it seems that the Jin Di sect is involved with Yang Yugong and the others, but they did not take action in the previous battle. It can be seen that the relationship between the two sects is not that deep. If I plan to target them now, it will instead cause them to fall over, which is not a good choice. However, there are also elders who think that the Jin Di sect is already quite powerful and is still growing. If we do not stop them now, when they take over all the demonic sects in the heavens and join forces with Yang Yugong and the others, the danger will be even greater. It is better to eliminate them now while they are weak. Even if we have to pay a price, it is better than having to deal with them in the future. This makes sense." Zhang Yan reminded, "If there are no accidents, the news about this sect was deliberately spread by Yang Yugong. If we deal with them now, we will fall into his trap." Elder Peng also nodded. "Yes, the elders and I also think so. Does fellow Taoist Zhang mean that we should not deal with them for the time being?" Zhang Yan said, "If we knew about this earlier, we might still be able to make it in time. It is a little too late to deal with the Jin Di sect now." Elder Peng frowned. "Then we should just ignore them." Zhang Yan smiled. Before the news spread, the Jin Di sect has not shown their true face, which means that they are still accumulating their strength. Demonic cultivators are mostly people with uncertain temperaments. Even if they are forced to do so, they may not be completely convinced. There is a lot that can be done here. Elder Peng thought of something and said, "Please enlighten me, fellow Taoist." Zhang Yan said, "According to what I know, many of the demonic cultivators are also leaning towards the Green Jade Palace. Why don't Elder Peng choose a few of them and support them to fight against the Jin Di sect? This way, we don't have to deal with the Jin Di sect directly, but we can also divide their strength. At the very least, we can stop them from rising." After listening, Elder Peng nodded and said, "Yes, fellow Taoist Zhang's plan is killing two birds with one stone. It really helps me solve a problem." At this point, he seemed to hesitate a little and said, "There is one more thing. I have been thinking about it for a long time, but I still can't make a decision. I would like to ask for fellow Taoist's opinion." Zhang Yan said, "Please speak, Elder Peng." Elder Peng looked over and said with a slightly serious expression, "A few days ago, the Plum Blossom Heaven Lord of the Fixed Star Heaven made an agreement with me. He is willing to help me deal with Yang Yugong and the others. Now, I have another Heaven Lord on my side. Fellow Taoist, if I fight with Yang Yugong and the others with all my strength, what do you think my chances of winning are?" Zhang Yan's eyes flickered and he immediately understood that Elder Peng was not asking about the chances of winning, but whether he supported this idea. Previously, Green Jade Palace's strategy was obviously to play safe. It could be seen that Elder Peng did not know what kind of tricks the few families of Jueyuan heaven had. Hence, he was very careful. Now, after a few clashes, he probably realized that this generation was not as powerful as he had imagined. Hence, he had such an idea. The previous difficulty was that the number of Heaven Lords on both sides seemed to be the same. However, one more Heaven Lord could break the balance. Obviously, the opportunity had come. Over the past few years, his strength had increased tremendously. It was not difficult for him to deal with this generation. As long as the Green Jade Palace was really determined, he was willing to end this battle earlier. After thinking about it, he said, "Just now, there is one thing that I have not told Elder Peng. In Xianhong Heaven, Jinren he has already achieved the Crossing Enlightenment Realm. He can come out to help at any time. If the Green Jade Palace has made a decision, you only need to inform I." Hearing this, Elder Peng could not help but be surprised. Just Zhang Yan's combat power alone was enough to be compared to a cultivator of the Crossing Enlightenment Realm. If there was another person like He Xianin, the chances of winning would be higher. He said solemnly, "I understand. I will discuss with fellow Taoist again in a few days." In a cave abode in Jueyuan Heaven, a silver-bearded Daoran stood on the altar. The two-realm dial in front of the table was shining with spiritual light. However, no one came out from the opposite side. He was very patient. After waiting for about 2 hours, the light finally shook and a four-eyed man appeared. He bowed and said, "Greetings, Sect Master Zhongling." Lord Zhongling sneered and said, "You are from Jiuyuan heaven and you still have the face to look for me. I am already giving you face for not looking for trouble in the past." Daoran was not in a hurry. If the other party was really going to do that, he would not have given him a chance to speak. However, he showed a surprised expression and said, "Sect Master Zhongling, may I know why you said that?" Lord Zhongling sneered and said, "Don't think that I don't know that the news about Jindi's sect was spread by Jiuyuan heaven." Daoran sighed and said, "Sect Master Zhongling, you have misunderstood. After my senior martial brother found out about this, he also sent people to investigate. In the end, it was confirmed that the news did not come from me. Moreover, there were many truths and falsehoods in the news, and it did not involve the identity of Sect Master Zhongling. It was not done by someone who really knows the inside story." Lord Zhongling replied with an, "Oh," and said, "In that case, I have wronged you." Daoran bowed and said, "I don't dare to." Lord Zhongling smiled disdainfully and said, "Don't say unnecessary words. Why are you looking for me today?" Originally, he wanted to be the fisherman behind the scenes, but after the news was exposed, it caused his plan to fail. When he found out about this, he was indeed slightly angry in his heart, but he knew that he couldn't shed all pretense of cordiality with Yang Yugong. Moreover, Yang Yugong still had some sense of propriety and didn't reveal his identity. Daoran said, "A few days ago, Heavenly Lord Han of Zhuang Heaven sent a letter saying that he is willing to work with us. Previously, 5 of our sects made the agreement. Now that there is another sect, we naturally have to make a new agreement. That is why I came to inform Sect Master Zhongling and see when it is convenient for you." Lord Zhongling was slightly surprised and said, "Zhuang Heaven. Interesting. In that case, with this person, your sect's strength can suppress Peng Xinhu's sect." Daoran bowed and said, "Sect Master Zhongling, you think too highly of us. Without Sect Master Zhongling, just the few of us alone will not be able to suppress Green Jade Palace." Lord Zhongling snorted and thought for a moment. He said, "Go back and tell Yang Yugong that I will come and meet them in the middle of next month." Chapter 1598. After Zhang Yan said goodbye to Elder Peng, he had only cultivated for a month when a servant came to report that there was movement on the spiritual wall. It seemed like there was news from Green Jade Palace. He dismissed the servant and left the room. He came to the front of the spiritual wall and shot out a spiritual light. Instantly, the light on the wall shook and the Deacon Taoist's body appeared. He bowed respectfully towards him and said, "Zhang Shangzhen, on the 1st of the next month, the elder invites you to the Cloud Continent for a chat." Zhang Yan had a thought, this was to discuss the matter of the battle. On the 1st of the next month, there was still half a month. He nodded and said, "Please go back and tell Elder Peng that I will be there." The Deacon Taoist bowed once more. The light on the wall retracted and there was no more movement. Zhang Yan returned to the hall and called Chu Zhao over, saying, "Go tell Zhenren he to send out a clone. 10 days later, we will head to the next world." Chu Zhao followed the order and left. Zhang Yan thought about it. After this Cloud Continent, maybe they would make a move soon. There were some things that needed to be arranged. Thus, he called the people below over and took care of them one by one. After giving the orders, he sat down and meditated. 10 days passed quickly. He still didn't move, but a clear energy floated out from his body, instantly forming into a clone. He walked out of the cave and stepped out of the hall. His eyes turned and he saw that Xianyin was already waiting there. He nodded his head towards him and said, "Zhenren he, follow me." After he said this, he left first. Not long later, the two of them came outside of the Imperial Edict Golden Hall. When they came here, he didn't stop, directly heading towards the 10,000 empty world ring. Xianyin also followed. When they passed through it, the two of them appeared on the Green Jade Palace Cloud Continent. The Deacon Taoist had been waiting there. When he saw the two of them arrive, he bowed and said, Zhang Shengzhen greets you, Jinren he greets you. Please follow me. He took out a spell and a formation door appeared in front of them. Zhang Yan took a step forward. His vision swayed slightly, and he found himself inside a floating palace. This place displayed the shape of a circle, one could sense its existence, but it was boundless, difficult to know its circumference. Outside the circle was a boundless void, more than 10 magical altars floating like stars, sometimes far, sometimes near, revolving around the central courtyard. His gaze swept across the area. The 4 heavenly lords of Jianji, Jieying, Huandu, and Yi Su had already arrived and were currently talking. The 4 of them sensed something and turned around to see He Xianyin and He Xianyin. They looked at each other and took the initiative to greet him. After the greetings, the Heavenly Lord of Inspection Heaven glanced at He Xianyin and said with a smile, I heard from Elder Peng that with your permission, Xian Hong Heaven has already set up the Golden Hall of Edicts. Zhang Yan smiled and said, I have always thought that although the method of good deeds is heartless, it is also selfless. As long as one acts righteously, it will benefit all living beings and open a convenient door for cultivators. The Heavenly Lord of Yi Su Heaven said from the side, the universe is one, but where there is gain, there is loss. In one place, it is a good deed, but in another place, it is a bad deed. He Xianyin then said, treat my good as good, treat my evil as evil. What do you think, Taoist friend? The Heavenly Lord of Yi Su Heaven frowned and was about to speak again when 2 auras came from outside. Everyone turned around and saw the Heavenly Lord of Yi Haitian, Ao Shao, and a female Taoist walking in. With a quick thought, they knew that this was Mei Ruoqing, the Heavenly Lord of Fixed Star Heaven who had recently joined them. After the 2 of them arrived, they came up to greet everyone. When Mei Ruoqing and Zhang Yan greeted each other, their gazes were slightly focused. There was both scrutiny and fear in their eyes. This was because among the people standing here, Zhang Yan was the only one who did not have the cultivation of Enlightenment Realm. However, he had the battle record of killing cultivators of Enlightenment Realm head-on. Moreover, his aura was deep and unfathomable, and she could not see the bottom of it at all. At this moment, a bell in the hall rang, and a formation door opened on the platform. Elder Peng appeared. His expression was solemn, and he cupped his hands at everyone. He said, Greetings, Taoist friends. Since you are all here, please take a seat. As soon as he said this, the surrounding altar that was floating in the air lit up with dazzling splendor, and it fell on everyone. Zhang Yan only felt a slight pulling force on his body. Knowing that it was not a hindrance, he allowed it to guide him. In the next moment, he was already standing in the altar. In this place, he seemed to be far away from everyone, but also close at hand. He immediately knew that he had arrived in a half-world. He nodded slightly. It seemed that Elder Peng was very cautious. This place was similar to the Void Primordial Sea. If he spoke here, he would not have to worry about anyone spying on him, and he would not be predicted by the heavenly secrets. At this moment, Elder Peng had also moved to an altar. He looked around. Apart from Yi Haitian's Heavenly Lord Ao Shao, who had reached the 4th Tribulation Realm, only Jianji Heaven's Heavenly Lord Yi Hongtu had reached the 3rd Tribulation Realm. The rest were mostly in the 1st and 2nd Tribulation barriers. As for the other side, according to what he knew, Jueyuan Heaven's Yang Yugong was in the 4th Tribulation Realm. He was also one of the few great cultivators in the 19 heavens. Apart from Zhu Zhutian's Heavenly Lord Juyu, whose strength was unknown, the other 2 were in the 2nd Tribulation Realm. On the surface, they seemed to be evenly matched. Previously, he thought that Yang Yugong and the rest would have many backup plans, and there might even be heavenly lords who had not shown themselves yet standing on their side. Therefore, he was very cautious. However, after the official confrontation, he realized that the situation was not as dangerous as he imagined. After all, the Green Jade Palace's reputation was still there. Many heavenly lords were still very cautious and did not dare to get involved easily. This time, he had successfully taken down Zhu Changtian. Although he had lost Wujue Heaven, Jianji Heaven, Jiaying Heaven, Huandu Heaven, and Ishu Heaven had also seen his capabilities. They were no longer evasive like before, and were truly willing to put in their efforts. After noticing the changes in this place, he did not delay any longer and decisively decided to push for this battle. He said in a deep voice, "Let's not talk about idle talk. Today, I have invited all of you here to eliminate Yang Yugong and the rest. This battle is not to be underestimated. We need to establish a contract here." As he spoke, he waved his sleeve and rays of golden light flew to where everyone was. They did not even land on He Xianyin. Zhang Yan watched as the golden light flew to him. When it neared him, it turned into a contract. He took it over and looked at it. Lines of words appeared on the contract. It stated what must be done in this battle and the benefits that could be obtained after the battle. Obviously, the contract in everyone's hands was different. On his contract, it promised that after this battle, Xian Hengtian would be under his name. No one could covet it. In the future, the prohibition would be broken. If anyone intruded without reason, not only could he kill the intruder, he could also invite the alliance to help him in battle. Those who were invited were not allowed to refuse without reason. He thought about it and believed that Green Jade Palace had made a similar promise to the others. This was equivalent to giving everyone a guarantee in exchange for maintaining the karma points system. His guess was right. Everyone, including Ao Xiao, was very satisfied with this arrangement, especially since the Green Jade Palace had promised that even if the Realm Lord wanted to pass on the inheritance, it could only be done with the approval of the previous Heavenly Master. No outsider, including the Green Jade Palace, could interfere. Elder Peng was, after all, the Hall Elder of Green Jade Palace. Once this contract was signed, even if he was overthrown in the future, the successor would have to admit that he could not be overthrown. In reality, Green Jade Palace did not care who would rule the lower worlds. As long as all the realms followed the karma points system, everything could be discussed. Zhang Yan continued to read. The following was also related to the benefits after the battle. However, it was not guaranteed that he would be able to obtain it. It was written on the contract that if he fought with Yang Yugong and the others and obtained any results, Green Jade Palace would not reward him separately. They would only record the results in the form of karma points. The more enemies he killed, the more karma points he would obtain. However, he believed that no one would object to this. This was because as long as he won the battle, he could use karma points to exchange for anything he wanted. He could even save up karma points and use them when necessary. After Zhang Yan finished reading, he saw that there were no problems with it. With a flick of his finger, a stream of qi flowed into the contract. At the same time, everyone present also flowed their qi into the contract. After the contract was completed, the contract instantly turned into golden light and dissipated. Half of it fell into everyone's dharmakaya, while the other half flew into the sky and disappeared in the blink of an eye. At this moment, apart from Zhang Yan, everyone's expression was no longer as relaxed as it was just now. Instead, all of them became serious. They all understood that even if Green Jade Palace was defeated, only Elder Peng's faction would be toppled. Their foundation would not be affected because the true Yang Almighty Expert was rumored to have only left and not died. Therefore, no one would dare to completely destroy Green Jade Palace in the remaining heavens. It was just that their influence would be temporarily reduced to the lowest level. However, it was different for them. Once they were defeated, they would really be destroyed. Because of this, at this time, no one thought about holding back like before. Instead, they were thinking about how to defeat the thugs. Ao Xiao raised his head and said, "Elder Peng, what is Green Jade Palace's plan for this battle?" Elder Peng said in a deep voice, "I've discussed it with the elders of Green Jade Palace for a while, and I've written it down in a jade slip. Please take a look at it." He flicked his sleeve, and the jade slips on the table in front of him floated up and flew towards everyone. Zhang Yan's gaze fell on the jade slip in front of him. The jade slip that flew towards him stopped on its own. He scanned it with his consciousness and read through its contents. There were many strategies here, and they were all feasible strategies deduced by Green Jade Palace's experts. However, there were only two ways to go about it. One was to attack one of the realms with all their might, forcing the other realms to come to their rescue. Then, they would decide the outcome of the battle. The advantage of this method was that they could gather all their strength like clenching a fist, and the damage would be minimized. Moreover, they would be able to seize the initiative to attack first. However, such a large movement would definitely attract the enemy's attention, and it would be almost impossible for them to launch a surprise attack. The other strategy was to attack separately. A small number of people would hold back Zhu Zhu, Huan, and Yuan Heavenly Masters, while the rest of the people would attack Yang Yugong. If they could kill him, it would be much easier to deal with the others. In fact, it would be equivalent to determining the outcome of the battle in advance. However, doing so would inevitably result in injuries, especially after everyone had split up. It would be difficult for them to contact each other again, and it would be difficult for them to know the changes in the battle situation. Moreover, there were too many variables, so it could only be considered a strange strategy. Elder Peng waited for a long time. When he saw that everyone had withdrawn their consciousnesses, he asked, "What do you think we should do this time?" Chapter 1599. After Elder Peng finished his question, the Divine Lord of Inspection was the first to speak. "I think it's safer to gather our forces and attack together. Even if there are any mistakes, we can still retreat in time." As soon as he said this, the other Divine Lords present all voiced their agreement. They were also inclined to fight steadily and surely. If they split up and fought, the situation would be unpredictable and they would not be able to get help from their allies. After all, no one wanted to put themselves in danger. Elder Peng's face was expressionless, but deep down, he was not very satisfied. According to his plan, they wanted to finish the battle in one fell swoop and kill all the enemies of the Green Jade Palace. If they did not grasp this opportunity, Yang Yugong would definitely know that they were weaker than them. If that happened, he would definitely not fight them head-on. That would be the most troublesome thing. He looked at Ao Xiao and asked, "What do you think, Divine Lord Ao?" Ao Xiao thought for a moment and said, "I also think that we should not split up too much. Why don't we invite 2 or 3 of our comrades to attack the various realms and use them as bait to lure Yang Yugong and the others to rescue us? Then, we will launch a large-scale attack and annihilate them." The Divine Lord of Inspection and the others looked at each other. They could all tell that this plan was aimed at Yang Yugong. As long as they killed the only cultivator who had undergone 4 tribulations, the rest would be easy to deal with. The plan was not bad, but there was a problem. It was difficult to guarantee the safety of the people they sent as bait. If they did not handle it well, they would end up dead. None of them was willing to be that person. Elder Peng nodded. Although Ao Xiao's plan was not exactly what he wanted, it was considered a good plan. However, when he looked around, he realized that most of the people around him were silent. He could not help but frown. Due to the restrictions of the rules, the Green Jade Palace did not have any enlightenment purification cultivators under their command. They could only rely on the few Divine Lords. However, it was obvious that no one was willing to do this. Even though he was the leader, he could not forcefully go against the will of the masses. He shook his head and could only give up regretfully. He said, "Since everyone doesn't agree with the strategy of attacking separately, then we can only use the strategy of attacking together. However, there's something we need to discuss here. Yang Yugong and the others have at least 5 worlds in their hands. Which one should we attack first?" Divine Lord Yanxiu said, "The 4 realms of Zhu Yuan, Zhu Zhu, Yuan, and Huan are the foundations of Yang Yugong and the others. There will definitely be layers of restrictive formations around the realm ring. We cannot force our way. If we want to enter, we can only break the realm pass from outside. However, that will give them a chance to defend. This is not the best plan." Heaven Lord Yi Su continued, "I also agree with Heaven Lord Huandu's view. Wuzhu Heaven has been occupied, but it has only been a few years. It is not enough time to build a world pass for these people to come and go. Even if there is a prohibition formation in front of the World Ring Gate, there won't be many. If Yang Yugong and the others come to save us, they will fall into our trap. If they don't come to save us, we can take this world back. They had already probed earlier. Zhu Yuan Tian and the other 4 realms had already built a connection formation gate, but they did not know how they managed to do it. Although it was far from being comparable to the 10,000 empty ring, at least it was unhindered. However, when they attacked Changtian, no one came to their rescue. Not even a single cultivator came. This meant that this thing could not be built in a hurry. It was the same for Wujue Heaven. There was an advantage in attacking this world first. Those sects that were chased out of this world were now on the Cloud Continent. They were very familiar with the situation in this world. Once they took back the Realm Ring, the Green Jade Palace would invite the Secret Hall elders to join them. With these people as their help, they would be able to hold this world firmly in their hands. The Divine Lord of Jianji Heaven said, I also think that Wujue Heaven should be the first to be taken. Yang Yugong took this place with great difficulty and will not give it up. Otherwise, his previous efforts will be a joke. If he comes, this will be the place for the final battle. Most of the Divine Lords present nodded their heads. Elder Peng pondered for a moment. Since everyone had agreed, then it wasn't good for him to continue objecting. He raised his head and looked at Zhang Yan. When he saw that the latter hadn't spoken a single word up until now, he couldn't help but have a thought and ask, Fellow Zhang, may I know if you have any brilliant ideas? All the cultivators looked over. Zhang Yan smiled faintly. In fact, he felt that this plan was only in line with the norm, and there was nothing special about it. The reason why it was accepted by everyone was because it took into account everyone as much as possible. Even if it failed, there would be a way out, and there would not be too many losses. Rather than saying this was a strategy, it was more like the result of everyone's compromise. The reason was that Green Jade Palace was restricted by the rules and couldn't bring out someone who could suppress all the cultivators. If it was in the 9 provinces, with the existence of Qingsang and Shaoqing sects, it would be impossible for such a situation to happen. He couldn't change this situation, nor did he have the intention to change it. He only said, fellow Taoists have their own considerations. I'm not from the Yuhuan Heavens, so it's not good for me to point fingers. However, I would like to remind you that we seem to have neglected the Jindi sect. If they attack us from the back when we are fighting with Yang Yugong and the others, I'm afraid it won't be appropriate. Elder Peng nodded and said, You're right. Someone who can gather demons from everywhere might also be a cultivator of enlightenment. Don't worry, I've already included this person in my calculations. He looked at where He Xianyin and Mei Ruoqing were and said, They don't know that Heavenly Lord Mei and enlightened being He have already entered our formation. When we fight with Yang Yugong and the others, we don't have to show ourselves. If that person from the Jindi sect really interferes with our battle, the 2 of them can deal with him. Zhang Yan shook his head slightly and said, I think that Elder Peng has underestimated this person. Elder Peng was a little surprised. Then, his expression gradually turned serious. Before the battle, he had to take into account all the variables that could affect the outcome of the battle. Any carelessness could lead to failure. Especially when it was Zhang Yan's words, he did not dare to take it lightly. He asked seriously, Can fellow Taoist explain it clearly? Zhang Yan said, As for the inside information about Jinlai, if I'm not mistaken, Yang Yugong was the one who intentionally leaked it. Elder Peng must have noticed that the information did not mention the cultivation of this sect's master. Is this because this person is not worth mentioning, or is Yang Yugong afraid of offending this person, so he doesn't dare to say it clearly? The cultivators present were deep in thought when they heard that. Zhang Yan continued, If it's the latter, then even if this person's strength isn't higher than Yang Yugong's, it might be close to it. Enlightened being he and Heavenly Lord Mei might not be able to stop him. At this moment, Mei Ruoqing spoke up, Zhang Shangzhen, you don't have to care about my face. If I were to go against someone with Yang Yugong's cultivation, there's no chance of me surviving. It's useless even if there are more people. The Heavenly Lord of Accumulated Triumph Heaven questioned, Zhang Shangzhen, aren't you overthinking it? If there really is such a person in the Yuhuan Heavens, why is he unknown to us? What he said was not without reason. According to common sense, a powerful cultivator could not just appear out of nowhere. Without the backing of a sect and the support of external medicine, how could he be created out of thin air? Zhang Yan said, the Jinlai sect has been gathering demonic cultivators, so the person in charge must be a human cultivator. He has been using the name of our sect's great underworld patriarch to insist that he is a righteous cultivator. I think that he might be related to the patriarch if he dares to do so. If that's the case, it actually makes sense. When everyone heard what he said, they couldn't help but think of the Jade Kun that guarded a realm outside Xianhong heaven. Their hearts immediately trembled. If the master of the Jinta sect also had such a background, then they really couldn't be underestimated. Elder Peng thought for a while and said, does fellow Taoist Zhang have any countermeasures? Zhang Yan said, you can leave the person behind the Jinlai sect to I. If this person's strength is ordinary, I will rush back to meet up with everyone after we deal with him. If his cultivation is high, we can also delay him and prevent him from helping Yang Yugong and the others. Elder Peng Daoren said, it's indeed suitable to leave this matter to fellow Taoist Zhang. However, this person's strength is unknown. Fellow Taoist, do you really not need help? Zhang Yan smiled and refused. There's no need. Yang Yugong has been planning for thousands of years, so he must have many tricks up his sleeves. Everyone, we cannot divide our forces any further. I can handle this. Elder Peng did not insist any further. Firstly, Zhang Yan's words made sense. He had limited manpower and could not divide too much. Secondly, if the Jinlai sect was related to the great underworld patriarch, then this would be a battle between the same sect. It was indeed not good for outsiders to interfere. He looked at everyone again. If there are no objections, then I will attack Wujue heaven first. The date will be set for 15 days later. Fellow Taoists, you can go back and make preparations first. Because the opponent was not easy to deal with, they could only decide on a general direction for this battle. The steps did not need to be too detailed and complicated. Moreover, the opponent would not follow the path they had thought of, so they could only adapt according to the situation. It was enough that the discussion had come to this point. Seeing that there was nothing more to say, the Heaven Lords bid their farewells and left. Zhang Yan was about to leave after saying goodbye, but he heard He Xianin's voice. I have something to say to Shangzhen. He was moved, so he took a step back. After most of the people in the hall had left, he said, Perfected He, if you have anything to say, you can say it now. He Xianin said, Shangzhen should know that I have had dealings with Qi Wang Heaven before. At this point, he paused for a moment before continuing, Sect Master Xian Hong once had an evaluation of Heaven Lord Han. He said that although she appeared to be content with being alone, she was actually not someone who would settle down. In particular, she coveted the profound stone. He told me to be careful and not to trust her too much. Zhang Yan narrowed his eyes. Perfected He, you mean that this Heaven Lord Han is very likely with you? He Xianin said, This is only my conjecture, but it is extremely possible. I didn't mention it to Shangzhen before because I didn't know which worlds are our allies, but now I don't dare to hide it. Zhang Yan nodded. I understand. Perfected He, please wait outside. He Xianin bowed and went outside. Zhang Yan turned around and went to where Elder Peng was. The latter saw that he did not leave and knew that something must have happened. That was why he stayed where he was. At this moment, he could not help but look at him with a questioning gaze. Zhang Yan smiled. Elder Peng, I'm afraid there will be one more person on the list that needs to be extra careful. Chapter 1600. Zhang Yan and Elder Peng discussed for a long while and decided on a few countermeasures before backing out of the hall. He called out to He Xianin and returned from the Cloud Continent. Not long later, the two of them passed the 10,000 space world ring and returned to Xianhong Heaven. He gave a few instructions and He Xianin bowed before taking his leave. He turned into a clear energy and entered the sky-scraping spell boat. In just a short while, he returned to his main body. The moment his clone returned, Zhang Yan woke up from his meditation. With a turn of his consciousness, he instantly knew everything that happened on the Cloud Continent. He thought for a long while before waving his sleeves and leaving the cave. He jumped up and turned into a clear light. With a loud explosion, he broke open the void and arrived outside of Xianhong Heaven. Ying Zhao noticed his arrival and quickly appeared nearby. He asked, "Why did Shangzhen come? Did you face something you don't understand in your cultivation?" Zhang Yan cupped his hands and said, "Greetings, fellow Taoist. I'm not here to cultivate, but to inquire about something." Ying Zhao said, "What does Shangzhen want to ask about?" Zhang Yan said, "When I was in the Yuhuan Heavens, I came across a sect called Jin Lai. They claim to have inherited the teachings of the founding master, so their disciples are all demons. Therefore, I guess that the person behind them should also be a different race and might have some relationship with the founding master. Back then, fellow Taoist followed the founding master to roam the void sky. Do you know about their background?" Ying Zhao thought about it and said, "The ancestor didn't accept demons and demons as disciples. However, the few of them had many slaves and mounts. However, when they left, they brought all of them away and there shouldn't be any left in the Yuhuan Heavens." Zhang Yan thought about it for a moment and nodded his head, "Sorry to disturb you." Just as he was about to leave, Ying Zhao said, "Wait a moment, I thought about something." His heart moved and he stopped. Ying Zhao continued, "Back then, founding master had a pool of Xianming water with him, and he kept a few Mou fish in it. These fish could help people to travel through the void. When founding master taught his disciples, he had preached about Tao several times, and these few fish listened to him and gained quite a bit of good fortune. After founding master left, for the convenience of traveling, the few Shangzhen would often take a fish with them. However, when the boy counted, he realized that one of them was missing, and he suspected that it had escaped. Could the monster that Shangzhen was talking about be this Mou fish?" Zhang Yan thought about it and said, "Cultivator, just now, you are saying that this fish can help one cross the space?" Ying Zhao said, "This fish is originally a creature from the Xianming Sea. The feathers on its body have the ability to connect to the space. However, the number of its feathers is also fixed. From birth to death, it can give birth to 36 feathers and when they are used up, it will die." When Zhang Yan heard this, he immediately had an idea and asked, "From what you said, there are still these demonic fish in the cave?" Ying Zhao said, "There are still 3 of them, but if they did not sever their bodies, they would need the Xianming water to be able to move. Now that the pond has dried up, it would be useless even if we find them." Zhang Yan said curiously, "When I came back before, I did not see them." Ying Zhao said, "There is something that you do not know. The things in this cave are seen by what is known, seen by what is seen, 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 seen by what is fated, so it is not surprising that you have not seen them." Zhang Yan nodded his head slightly and understood. What he meant was that everything in the cave, only things that he knew and could understand, would be shown in front of him. However, some things were related to fate and cultivation. If one's cultivation was not enough, or if he was not fated, then he would not be able to see them. He said, "Since you are telling me about these demonic fish, I guess I can see them now." He had a feeling that the leader of the Jin Di sect was most likely this type of demonic fish. Since he was going to fight with him, he had to find a way to understand a thing or two. Ying Zhao said, "Since you know about them, of course you will be able to see them. You can go to the cave to look for them." As it said this, its body shone brightly and a path formed by the light was paved. Zhang Yan took a step forward and stood on the light. In a flash, he had returned to the cave. However, this time, he did not appear outside of the rippling water. Instead, he stood beside a pool. This place was only 1,000 feet in circumference and the pond was already at the bottom. There were 3 strange fish that were the size of a palm lying at the bottom. He said, "Is this the Mou fish?" Ying Zhao said, "This is the fish." Zhang Yan took one of the fish and saw that it was curled up into a ball. There were still 6 scales on its body and the rest of its body was covered with tentacles that looked like hair. At this moment, it was not moving at all. If one did not sense it carefully, one would not be able to detect that extremely weak life force. Ying Zhao said, "Without the Xianming water, this fish will not wake up." Zhang Yan asked, "Where did this Xianming water come from?" Ying Zhao said, "I know where it came from, but I cannot tell you. This thing has no connection with the Shangzhen." Zhang Yan nodded his head and did not force the issue. He asked again, "About this demonic fish, is there anything else that you can tell I?" Ying Zhao said, "Back then, the Shangzhen left behind a book. That place can be seen at a glance. Why don't the Shangzhen go and take a look at it yourself?" Zhang Yan suddenly had a feeling in his heart. He raised his head and happened to see a floating island. Inexplicably, he felt that the thing he was looking for was here. However, he clearly remembered that at this time last time, although there were many floating islands in the sky, this one actually did not exist. He thought to himself, "Indeed, what you see is what you know." With a tap of his foot, he flew up and arrived on the island in a flash. Not far away, there was a tall mountain, half of it hidden in the clouds. He could see a few cloud serpents circling around it, but they all turned a blind eye to him. He continued to go up and saw a matrix door standing in the air. He went in and felt a slight hindrance on his dharmakaya. Then, he appeared in a stone residence. There were many caves in the surroundings. The layout of the cave was similar to the golden hall of the floating heavenly palace. However, there were only a few jade scrolls. He waved his hand and took them. There were a total of 3 jade scrolls in his hand. One was about the changes of formation while the other was about the tips of alchemy. All of them were profound and unfathomable. He could see that these jade scrolls were extremely compatible with the Qinsang school's martial arts. They should be passed down from the same source. The value of these jade scrolls was immeasurable. This was an unexpected surprise. After solemnly putting them away, he took the last one in his hand and immersed his consciousness into it. This was about how to raise and control the Mo feather fish, and there was nothing more to it. He pondered for a while. The color and shape of this jade scrolls were different from the previous 2. It seemed like it was taken from somewhere else. It did not mention the weakness of the demonic fish and the method to restrain it. This was normal. In the eyes of the great mediums, this was not even worth mentioning. However, this was enough. According to Ying Zhao, if the master of the Jin sect was really this demonic fish, he must have cut off his mortal body to be able to survive until now. Then, he would be different from his original race. He kept the jade scrolls and looked around. After keeping the few jade scrolls, the place became empty. However, he could vaguely see something in his spirit. It was just that it was not clear. He realized that he might only be able to see more when he improved his martial arts or when the opportunity came. Hence, he did not stay here anymore. He turned around and left the stone residence. After bidding farewell to Ying Zhao, he returned to Xianhong Heaven through the myriad empty ring. Then, he entered the magic ship and sat on the cattail hassock, waiting for the day of the final battle. In Zhuyuan Heaven, Yang Yugong was meditating. Suddenly, he felt an inexplicable fear. The feeling disappeared as if it had never existed. He probed for a long time but could not find any trace of it. He could not help but frown and pondered, could it be that there is an unforeseen event? A few days ago, he had specially asked Patriarch Qingtong to use his vital qi to predict the changes in the future, in a vain attempt to seek fortune and avoid calamity. However, in the end, he did not predict anything, which made him feel uneasy. It was obvious that the mysteries of heaven had been concealed from the beginning. In his opinion, the Green Jade Palace might be planning something big. He thought for a while and summoned a disciple. How is the construction of the Qi Wang Heaven Realm Pass? The disciple replied, it will be completed in another 1 or 2 years. Yang Yugong said unhappily, didn't we double the number of people previously? Why are you dragging it for so long? The disciple felt wronged and said, the golden feather given by the sect leader seems to be different from the others. The spiritual opportunity on it seems to be limited, which is why I can't complete it. Yang Yugong immediately knew what the problem was. The realm gate could only be built with the golden feather given by Lord Zhongling. This person must be unhappy that he had revealed the background of Jindi sect a few days ago, so he purposely used these methods to make things difficult for him. Shen Lian shook his head. At this time, this person was still playing tricks. This person's attitude was too low. No wonder he had not achieved anything for millions of years despite his amazing mana. He ordered, "Send more people there. I will think of a solution for the golden feather. The formation gate of Qi Wang Heaven must be built well. Otherwise, if they fought with Green Jade Palace, Han Su would have to break through the realm and rush over. That would take at least a few years, and this help would be almost non-existent." However, compared to this, the feeling just now made him more worried. Previously, during the meeting, he had suggested to attack one of the realms on the Green Jade Palace's side. His intention here was to seek the initiative and find a way to mobilize the enemy instead of waiting for the enemy to attack them. Moreover, while the Green Jade Palace was dealing with the enemy, they would have more time to prepare. Although this strategy was correct, no one responded to it. In the eyes of the other Heaven Lords, if they acted rashly, they might fall into Elder Peng's trap. The Green Jade Palace had many celestial artifacts, and they had seen what happened to the Perpetual Heaven Lord. In their own heaven realm, they had the help of the restrictive formation and the help of their allies at any time. It could be said that they had the home advantage. If they left these places, it would be equivalent to abandoning their own advantages. They would definitely not agree. Although Yang Yogong's cultivation was the highest among them, he was also a combination of many benefits. He could not force the other heaven masters, so he could only go with the crowd. Under such circumstances, even if he knew that he would not be able to change anything, he sighed and said, "I am at my weakest now." He sighed in his heart and said, "I'm at my weakest now. I can only hope that the attack from Green Jade Palace will come later. If they can delay it for another 3 to 5 years, the situation might change a little. Otherwise, I'll be in danger." Chapter 1601. Half a month later, it was the appointed time to attack Wujue Heaven. Zhang Yan got out of the spiritual boat and brought He Xianyin to Cloud 6 through the world ring. Green Jade Palace had prepared a realm-crossing flying boat that was as big as Cloud 6. Seeing the two of them, the Taoist in charge invited them to the spiritual boat. Elder Peng came out to greet them personally. Behind him, there were 2 mortal transformation cultivators. After greeting each other, Zhang Yan found out that one of them had the surname Su and the other had the surname Fan. They were originally cultivators of Wujue Heaven and were in charge of a sect. When Yang Yugong and the others attacked, they were the ones who held the sect until the end. They only retreated after Green Jade Palace gave the order. In this plan, the 2 of them would be the vanguard. It turned out that ever since the Heavenly Lord was gone, there were only 4 mortal shedding true essence cultivators left in Wujue Heaven. Their cultivation bases were all in the first-degree realm. Other than these 2, the other 2 were on distant Enlightenment Heaven's side. Obviously, Su and Fan had heard of Zhang Yan's ability. When they talked to him, they were very respectful. Zhang Yan followed Elder Peng into the spiritual boat and was given a temporary cave abode. The spiritual opportunity flourished here, and there were also spiritual mountains and rivers. It was no different from the grotto heavens outside. There was a large amount of purple clear medicine prepared here. However, to him, he could cultivate as long as he had mystic stones. Moreover, as his vitality grew, these medicines became less useful to him. Even during battles, they would not be of much help. Therefore, he gave some of them to He Xianyin. However, after half a day, the heavenly masters arrived one after another. In order to win this battle, they brought most of the combat power from their respective void realms. Seeing that everyone had arrived, Elder Peng did not delay any longer. He called everyone to the main hall and then gave the order to go to Wujue Heaven. In a flash, the spiritual boat passed through the myriad empty world ring. Just like when they attacked Xianhong Heaven, the spiritual boat first landed in a half-realm outside of Wujue Heaven. Of course, they had to do so because they were blocked by the restriction array. This time, they did it on purpose so that their whereabouts wouldn't be exposed. Elder Peng called Elder Su and Elder Fan over and said, "I will send 3 elders to assist the 2 of you in attacking this world. If the master of the outer world heaven comes to help, I and my fellow Taoists will enter this world in time to stop him. Do the 2 of you have anything else to say?" Su and Fan, 2 people shook their heads, saying that there was nothing. They had already done what they had to do, and they were fully prepared. The only thing they had to worry about was suddenly bumping into Cultivator Du Ju. Fortunately, they had the Dharma artifacts given to them by the Green Jade Palace. As long as they were careful, they could still escape in time. Elder Peng nodded and solemnly bowed. "Then I shall leave it to the 2 of you." The 2 of them hurriedly returned the greeting. Just at this moment, Zhang Yan said, "Fellow Taoists, take these 2 talismans with you. They can help you when you need them." He flicked his fingers, and 2 golden lights flew out. Su and Fan caught them. They could feel that the talismans contained a shocking aura and knew that they were not ordinary items. They quickly thanked Zhang Yan and carefully put them away. Then, they took a few steps back and bowed again. They led the cultivators under them and the 3 elders of the Green Jade Palace out of the spiritual boat and into the Myriad Empty World Ring. The Myriad Empty World Ring was the work of a true Yang Grand Cultivator. Even Yang Yugong and the others could not destroy it. To prevent the Green Jade Palace from using it to attack, they could only set up restrictions in the inner world ring. Through the information from his spies, Elder Peng already knew that there was no Heaven Master guarding this place. There was not even a clone. Zhu Zhen had previously judged this news and felt that it was trustworthy. Yang Yugong and the other Heaven Masters had to protect their own world first. There was no reason for them to go and guard another world. Also, if Cultivator Du Ju really invaded, a single clone would not be able to stop him. They would just be wasting their essence energy and magic power for nothing. It was better not to do so. As for everyone leaving their clones in Wujue Heaven, this seemed like a good idea. However, if they really did this, there would be no room for negotiation. This was because wherever Cultivator Du Ju's first clone landed would be where his subsequent clones would land as well. It would be very easy for others to set up traps. Anyone with a bit of foresight would not make this choice. It had only been a month since the Green Jade Palace came up with the plan and launched the surprise attack. Elder Peng's actions were very fast, so Juyu and Heaven's side still had no idea about the upcoming attack. However, this did not mean that they were not prepared. In fact, aside from the fact that Cultivator Du Ju was not guarding, they had already done everything they could. The moment Su, Fan, and the others passed through the world ring, they only felt their bodies sway, and they had already entered Wuju Tian. In the next moment, the densely packed restrictions around them flashed. It was obvious that the formation that was set up here had moved. However, they had already expected this, so they took out their magic treasures and talismans to offset the formation chi that was coming from all directions. With this obstruction, they had a chance to catch their breath. Daoist Su immediately raised his sleeve and tossed a golden needle into the air. The needle paused in the air, and with a point of the needle, it pierced through the air in a certain direction. He was energized and immediately transmitted a message in his spirit: "The exit of the array door is here. Hurry up and follow." In reality, without waiting for his instructions, rays of conveyance light had already soared from the array and chased after the golden light. Along the way, the 5 of them continuously relied on the talisman's magic treasures to block the restrictions. Unless they had no other choice, they would only sacrifice the root fruit and try to avoid it. The reason why they did this was that there would definitely be someone guarding this place. If they were to predict the location of the root fruit, even if they managed to get out successfully, they would lose half of their advantage. The Taoist guarding the array on Wujue Heaven's side was surnamed Gao. He was originally a cultivator of Huan Heaven. At this moment, he was standing on the array altar with a jade tablet in his hand. He was looking at the movements in the array solemnly. At this moment, a disciple came to report, "Shangzhen, I have already reported the attack as per your orders." Taoist Gao said calmly, well done. Go and take care of the people below. Hold on for a while longer. Reinforcements will arrive soon. This time, we must make sure that this group of people stays. He looked relaxed, but he was secretly complaining. This was because he could tell that the Green Jade Palace had come prepared this time. They would not just send these few people to their deaths. Perhaps there were many powerful people waiting for an opportunity outside. If this guess was true, then it was not something that he could resist. The only thing he could do now was to delay as much as possible. Thanks to Taoist Gao's timely report, Yang Yugong received the news the moment the restriction on Wujue heaven was broken. He acutely felt that his worries might become reality. He thought to himself, Peng Xinhu is really decisive. He attacked so quickly. Wujue heaven, he sighed. They could not give up on Wujue heaven. This was a realm that they had taken down with great difficulty. If they lost this place, not only would their previous efforts be in vain, but they would also show others their weakness. One had to know that until now, there were still a few realms watching from the sidelines. Among them, there was a heavenly master who was a great cultivator who had passed through the 4 tribulations of Wujue heaven. His skills were not inferior to his. If these people realized that they might lose, they would most likely choose to hit them when they were down. He summoned a trusted disciple and said, Go and tell junior brother Luo that Wujue heaven is under attack. Let him bring people to help. But remember, if you see a powerful enemy, don't fight with your life. You can retreat first. The disciple agreed and went to pass on the order. Yang Yugong stood up from his seat and walked to the front of the table. He stretched out his hand and pressed the dial in front of him. A ray of spiritual light flew out from the dial. A moment later, Lord Zhongling appeared and said lazily, Sect leader Yang, why are you looking for me? Yang Yugong said in a deep voice, Sect master Zhongling, Green Jade Palace is attacking Wujue heaven. They came back with bad intentions. I suspect that they must have roped in more people in the past few years. Lord Zhongling scoffed and said, Then what do you want, Sect Master Yang? Yang Yugong said, There might have been some misunderstandings between our two sects before, but this is just a small matter. Now that I am going to help the Wujue heaven, I hope that Sect Master Zhongling can release the restraints of the world pass and let me pass smoothly. The boundary pass that led to Wujue heaven could not be crossed. This was not because of the people who built it, but because Lord Zhongling still held a grudge against them for spreading the news. Hence, he was not willing to let them go. Seeing that Lord Zhongling did not speak, Yang Yugong continued, Sect leader Zhongling, you should understand that without us, the Jindi sect would not be able to fight against the Green Jade Palace alone. Right now, we are bound together. If there is any misunderstanding, I am willing to pay a personal visit to apologize after this battle. Seeing that Yang Yugong was humble and sincere, Lord Zhongling was finally satisfied. He said, Sect Master Yang, feel free to help. There won't be any obstacles along the way. Yang Yugong thanked him and said, But for this battle, I might need Sect Master Zhongling's help. Lord Zhongling waved his hand and said, Don't worry, Sect leader Yang. Just as you said, the Jindi sect alone will not be able to suppress the Green Jade Palace. If they really attack us, I will take action when necessary. Yang Yugong nodded. He was not afraid of breaking his promise. After all, both parties had signed a contract. After bidding farewell, he withdrew his mana and said, Come in. A disciple hurried in and reported, Sect Master, Zhu Zhu, Yuan, and Huan, the 4 heaven lords have arrived. After Yang Yugong heard the news, he stood still in the hall as if he was waiting for something. After a while, another disciple came in and reported, Sect Master, wielding Heaven Lord has also arrived. After Yang Yugong heard the news, his eyes lit up. He said, Good, good. Then, he walked out of the formation door and went straight to the main hall. At this moment, the 5 heaven lords were already waiting there. He stood on the stairs and said, Fellow Taoists, we can't afford to lose Wujue heaven. I suspect that Green Jade Palace will attack with all their strength this time. If that's the case, we'll have to fight them in advance. For this reason, I've come to an agreement with the Zhongling sect master of the Jinwu sect. He'll help us when necessary. His gaze swept across the few of them. To ensure that Wuzhu heaven is not lost, if you have no questions, we'll leave now. The 5 heaven lords knew that if things were as Yang Yugong predicted, this battle was inevitable. However, they were quite confident about it. After all, they were on the defensive this time. They had made many arrangements in Wuzhu heaven over the past few years and had the geographical advantage. They did not need to completely destroy the enemy in this battle. As long as they could think of a way to repel them, it would be considered a victory. Chapter 1602. Inside the Wuzhu heaven, Daoist Su and Daoist Fan followed the flying needle. After half a day, they finally broke through the restriction formation. It seemed like a long time had passed, but in the eyes of the people waiting outside, it was already extremely fast. If it was a world like the Wuzhu heaven, the restriction formation inside was extremely complicated and had been laid down for tens of thousands of years. It was also guarded by powerful cultivators, so the intruder would not be trapped inside. Without more than a month of effort, it would be impossible to reach the outside. Even if they were lucky enough to succeed, it was likely that the intruder's location had already been calculated. Therefore, attacking the Wuzhu heaven was not a good idea. Compared to that, the Wuzhu heaven was indeed an easier way to break through. When Daoist Su was outside, he immediately took out a treasure mirror that he had prepared beforehand and said, "Fellow Daoists, please protect me." Then, he shone it in the direction of the 10,000 empty ring. A golden light shot out and landed in the ring, connecting the two ends like a rainbow bridge. Daoist Fan and the 3 elders of the Green Jade Palace moved away from the golden light and surrounded him. They all took out formation discs. As long as the formation was set up here, they could avoid the formation and open another door in the inner realm. The cultivator waiting outside could then come in, but the premise was that no one would disturb or destroy it. The cultivator with the surname Gao, who was guarding this place, was shocked. He could roughly guess what they wanted to do and understood that he had to stop them. Otherwise, if cultivator Du Ju entered, he would not be able to survive. He quickly ordered the people in the formation to not be distracted and continue to guard the formation. Then, he flew out and arrived in the sky. His palm faced outwards, and the aura on his body continued to rise. Then, he pointed outwards. In an instant, a stream of light that seemed to split heaven and earth slashed towards the 5 people. Daoist Su quickly called out, "Elder Wang." Among the 3 elders of Green Jade Palace, one of them also flew into the air and came to the front. He held a spell in his hand, and a spiritual light shone from his body. It was like a golden screen that enveloped everyone. When the ray of light hit the screen, there was a huge explosion. It was like a thunderclap. The golden screen shook violently, but it managed to withstand the attack and did not shatter. When Cultivator Gao saw that his first attack had failed, he attacked again and again. However, that Elder Wang was very calm and composed. Unexpectedly, his defense was watertight and he didn't allow his opponent to succeed. The rest of the people behind him seized the opportunity to chant incantations. Not long after, the 4 array discs descended and merged together. Almost in an instant, an array gate that was extremely similar to the myriad jade sky world ring slowly appeared in the void. It looked like it wouldn't take long for it to completely appear. However, right at this moment, the 5 of them sensed a powerful aura approaching them. They knew that the enemy's reinforcements had arrived. Just as he was thinking about this, he saw a Daoran flying over. Just now, he was at the edge of the sky, but in the blink of an eye, he was already very close. When Cultivator Gao saw this person, he no longer attacked. Instead, he retreated to the side and gestured from a distance. Daoist Fan sensed the aura on Doran's body and his expression changed. He said, "This person is Yang Yogong's junior brother Luo Shu. As Elder Peng guessed, he has already passed the first tribulation. Everyone, you must be careful." Daoran nodded to Cultivator Gao in response. Then, He floated up and stretched out his hand. He gently pressed down on the restriction that protected the 5 people. It was as if countless mountains were pressing down at the same time. The protective brilliance around them was like candlelight in the wind, trembling incessantly. The 4 array discs on the ground all made cracking sounds and fine cracks appeared on their surface. The realm gate that had already condensed became blurry once again. Taoist Fan was startled and said, "Not good, we must not let this person succeed." If this continued, it wouldn't take long for them to break in. Once they lost their protection, the person outside would only need to use his magical power to drag them into the changes of the past and future. If they didn't sacrifice the root fruit, they could only be slaughtered. But if they did, it was very likely that the other party would be able to predict where they would land in a short period of time. That would also be a dead end. How could the 3 elders of the Green Jade Palace not understand this? They all desperately stabilized the array discs. At the same time, they took out their ritual talisman and attacked the outside world. However, Daoran didn't do anything and allowed these things to come to him. Most of them passed through his body. Only a few hit him, but they were all blocked by a layer of treasure light. None of the 5 of them had reached the 3rd stage. It was completely useless for them to attack a cultivator from Duju. However, they did not expect that even the talisman that they had refined for the cultivator from Duju would not be of much use. This wasn't to say that the original owners of the bodies didn't have the magical power of the person in front of them. It was just that with their realm and magical power, they couldn't use these things to their full potential. This time, the attack was futile. Everyone stopped. Taoist Su, who was holding the treasure mirror, couldn't help but feel anxious. He said, "Everyone, quickly think of a way to delay for a while. The array door here hasn't been erected yet." Elder Wang of the Green Jade Palace said with a serious expression, "Taoist Fan, we've used everything that can be used. Even if we take out the rest, we won't be able to deal with Daoran. We can only rely on our magical power to block him." Taoist Fan said, "No, there's one more thing." He reached into his sleeve and took out a ritual talisman. This was the ritual talisman that Zhang Yan had given him before he left. He didn't know if this item could really deal with the situation at hand. No matter what, the only thing he could rely on now was the talisman in his hand. Thus, he didn't hesitate anymore and used the talisman. The moment he shook his hand, a golden light appeared and flashed behind him. It was as if heaven and earth had been extinguished once. Luo Daoran made a sound of surprise. The next moment, his entire body burst like a bubble. With a gust of wind, he disappeared without a trace. The outside world returned to normal. It was as if everything just now was just an illusion. The 5 of them couldn't help but be stunned. None of them had thought that the ritual talisman would be so powerful. This ending was too inexplicable. They didn't even know if Daoran had disappeared or if he had been expelled. Taoist Fan reached out and touched the remaining talisman in his sleeve. He put it back and then turned around to help Taoist Su maintain the array door. At the moment, the most important thing was to erect the receiving realm pass. He could only put these questions to the back of his mind. On the other side, Yang Yugong and the rest had just now arrived at the boundary. They happened to see this scene and couldn't help but be stunned. There were many cultivators here who couldn't understand this scene. One of them said, "This. Where did Luo Daoran go?" Yang Yugong pondered for a while and said, "Just now when the golden light shone, all the spiritual vigor was cut off. Junior brother Luo's Dharmakaya has been eliminated." The other heavenly lords nodded one after another. However, their expressions were slightly solemn. To achieve this, not only did one have the power to destroy a cultivator's Dharmakaya, one also had to have the power to completely destroy the opponent in an instant. Even though Luo Shu only appeared with an ordinary Dharmakaya, it was also necessary to see that the other party had only taken out a talisman. The owner of the talisman was actually not here personally. Huan Heavenly Lord said, "Just now, I've never seen that chi dynamic before. Fellow Taoists, can you tell who it is?" Juyu said, It's not someone I know and I've never seen such a technique. However, the person who could make such a ritual talisman must have the cultivation of Dujue. He's at least around 3 tribulations. Perhaps it was made by one of the Green Jade Palace's elder Dujue. Yang Yugong thought that this guess was very reasonable. The Green Jade Palace had a deep foundation. He knew that there was a secret hall in the palace. Although the elders there were not restricted by the rules and could not attack recklessly, the disciples of the palace could use the ritual talismans that they made. Juyu pondered for a moment and said, there can't be many of such ritual talismans. Moreover, Luo Daoren was just not on guard just now. If he wasn't so careless, with his ability to move, he could have dodged it. At this moment, the chi dynamic in the sky suddenly flourished. Then, a grand brilliance descended from the sky. It was Doran's first-level Dharmakaya that descended. However, when he was slashed by the golden light just now, the border pass had already stabilized. If he rushed forward now, unless he could destroy this place in a short period of time, he would not be able to stop it. Priest Su took a step back and stood on the formation plate. He transmitted a message through his spirit, fellow Taoists, please guard this place before the Great Ones arrive. Priest Fan held the talisman again and looked outside with extreme vigilance. However, unexpectedly, Luo Daoren only glanced at them and did not come forward. Instead, he immediately transformed into a ray of clear light and fled outside, as if he had sensed some danger. At the same time, a brilliance flickered above the border pass. Then, a ray of clear light landed outside the border pass. Ao Xiao was the first to step out. Behind him, the 4 heavenly masters of Jianji, Huandu, Jieying, and Yishu also appeared one by one. However, all of them had only revealed their ordinary Dharmakaya at this moment. Their chi dynamic had been suppressed to the lowest level, which was why they did not cause any strange phenomena in this world. Yang Yugong looked at them and said, these are all familiar faces. I'm afraid that Peng Xinhu's true strength this time isn't limited to the ones before us. Juyu glanced at them and said, that's not strange. That priest Zhang can kill a cultivator at the second tribulation of enlightenment. It's impossible for Peng Xinhu not to use such combat strength. However, he hasn't appeared here yet. It's obvious that he has some tricks up his sleeves. Yang Yugong waved his hand and said, that's not surprising. They have their own plans, but it's not like we don't have any tricks up our sleeves. It's just a matter of who's more brilliant. Everyone, since the guests have arrived, as the hosts, we should go forward and welcome them. As he spoke, he took the lead and Ju Yu and the others followed behind him. Within the half-world, Zhang Yan had been standing on the boat. He looked indifferently at the situation within the half-world through the border pass. Because cultivators at the enlightenment stage had many more Dharmakaya than cultivators at the mortal metamorphosis stage, and their roots and fruits were also twists and turns, it would only take longer for them to destroy each other. Not to mention that both sides had yet to reveal their hidden cards. If they wanted to determine the victor, they would probably have to wait here for a long time. However, at this moment, he suddenly felt a sense of danger in his heart. He raised his head and saw that the sky above the half-world had already silently split open. After that, numerous tentacles probed in, and at the same time, there was an abnormally enormous aura surging in from the outside like a vast ocean. Chapter 1603. Following the arrival of the Qi, not long after, a strange fish with tentacles all over its body was reflected in everyone's eyes. Zhang Yan narrowed his eyes slightly. This fish was extremely similar to the Moyu fish he saw in the cave abode beyond the sky, but there were no scales on its body. On the head of the strange fish stood a handsome man with a straight body and 4 eyes. He wore a loose silver robe, and when his sleeves fluttered in the wind, it looked like a cluster of flickering stars. He could sense that this person was not at the Enlightenment realm, but a third-stage realm cultivator who had severed the past and future. However, his magic power was as vast and bottomless as the ocean. Even the 2 fourth-stage Enlightenment realm cultivators below might not be able to compare to him. After a cultivator reached the 3rd stage of the mortal transformation realm, it was actually very difficult to increase his magic power anymore. He judged that this person was either born with this ability or accumulated it through some kind of secret technique. Everyone on the Green Jade Palace's side also sensed how powerful the newcomer was. However, they found it unbelievable that the newcomer was not a cultivator from enlightenment. Mei Ruoqing could not help but turn to look at Zhang Yan, because the latter had the same reaction. She thought for a while and said, such powerful magic power, but he has not entered the enlightenment realm. Sage Zhang, is this the sect master of Jin Di sect that you mentioned? Zhang Yan said, that's him. Elder Peng, it's not appropriate for the two sage masters to reveal their identities now. As previously discussed, I will go out and meet him. Elder Peng said solemnly, Sage Zhang, please be careful. Zhang Yan nodded, and his body floated out of the teleportation light from the magic boat. He went to the sky and stood opposite the person on the strange fish. He looked at him and said, are you the sect master of Jindi sect? Lord Zhongling chuckled and put his hands behind his back. He said, that's right. My name is Zhongling. You must be Zhang Yan. I heard you say that you are the direct disciple of the patriarch, so in terms of origin, you should call me senior of the sect. Zhang Yan smiled and said, I'm afraid you're mistaken. Although I've never seen the ancestral master's face, I know that the ancestral master has his own rules. He doesn't allow his juniors to accept demons as their disciples. Lord Zhongling's expression immediately darkened. Although he claimed to be the direct disciple of the great underworld patriarch, he was actually just a servant. These words clearly touched his sore spot. He snorted and said coldly, let me ask you, is the profound stone passed down by the patriarch in your hands? Zhang Yan said indifferently, this is a matter of my sect and has nothing to do with you. Lord Zhongling's eyes were vaguely angry when he heard this, but he did not flare up. Instead, he endured it and said, if I'm not wrong, that item should be in your hands. Considering our relationship, if you can take it out, I can show some mercy today and not make things difficult for you. He was different from Yang Yugong and the others. He knew some of the secrets of the profound stone, and it was impossible for it to be shared with unrelated people. Those who could benefit from it were either the descendants of the great underworld patriarch, or cultivators who cultivated the same cultivation method and had some sort of connection with it. To get the profound stone, it would be best if the previous owner voluntarily handed it over. That would save a lot of trouble. If that did not work, they could only choose to kill the previous owner. Only then would the profound stone appear in the world again. However, at this moment, he could also feel that Zhang Yan was not simple. He guessed that the latter had been cultivating with the profound stone for a period of time. If they fought, it would not be settled in a short period of time. Therefore, he used words to tempt Zhang Yan, hoping that he could make Zhang Yan hand over the profound stone. Zhang Yan smiled and said, since you are on Heaven Master Yang's side, you must have signed a contract. How should I show mercy? Because of the cultivation method and the fact that he was a variant, Lord Zhongling's emotions were fickle. Sometimes, he did not seem like a cultivator at all. Seeing that words did not work, he immediately became a little impatient. His eyes flashed fiercely as he said, all right, since that's the case, I can only take it myself. As soon as he finished speaking, silver waves appeared out of nowhere in the half-world. They were not only limited to where the two of them were standing, but they were everywhere. When they came out, there was no sound at all. Wherever the water passed, everything that came into contact with it disappeared one by one. It was as if everything had been erased from this world. The big magic boat that was moored at the side also did not escape. It was also surrounded by the white water. Fortunately, the restrictive formation on the boat was strong. Although it was constantly being eroded, it seemed to be able to hold on. However, the magic boats that came with the low-level cultivators did not have the same ability. As the strange water came into contact with them, they lost their spiritual vigor and slowly melted. Obviously, many cultivators hurriedly escaped from the half-world. However, when many of them reached the outside world, the white water inexplicably appeared on their bodies. At most, within 2 to 3 breaths, they were completely melted. Elder Peng saw that something was wrong. There were not only the disciples of Green Jade Palace here, but also the disciples of the Heavenly Masters. They were all disciples who were used to guard the array door and the array disc. If all of them died here, it would be difficult to explain. Thus, he immediately said, "Someone, bring the people from the outside world in." The Taoist in charge reminded, "Elder, if these disciples are placed on the magic boats, you will have to restrain your qi. If you encounter an enemy, they will also die." Although these cultivators were at least in the Yuanying realm, once the qi of a mortal metamorphosis realm cultivator increased, they would not be able to withstand it. Therefore, they stayed in the outside world. They originally thought that the half-world was very safe, but who would have thought that someone could actually break in? Elder Peng said in a deep voice, "We can't care too much about this. Let's save them first." At this moment, Mei Ruoqing said, "Everyone can go and save them without worry." She took out a spiritual art, and in an instant, a faint spiritual circle appeared on everyone's body. It concealed everyone's qi. Elder Peng looked at her and nodded. The Taoist in charge immediately led people out to rescue them. Soon, they rescued the surviving cultivators. When Elder Peng looked again, all he saw was a vast expanse of whiteness. Apart from that, he could not see anything. It seemed that the entire half-world was filled with this silver water. Guan Longzhao said with a solemn expression, "Elder, this Lord Zhongling's supernatural power is not weak. This water seems to be able to destroy qi. I wonder if Zhang Shangzhen can handle it." Elder Peng said with certainty, "With Taoist Zhang's ability, he should be fine." The Taoist in charge reminded, "Elder, I see that both of them have strong supernatural power. Perhaps we can retreat further away." Elder Peng agreed immediately. It was impossible for them to leave this place because they could only help Wu Juetian at any time if they were here. However, they could avoid the place where the two of them were fighting. When the white water emerged just now, Zhang Yan was also enveloped by the water. However, he was unmoved. Wisps of malice emerged from his body and coiled around him like smoke, isolating him from the water. Then, he slowly circulated his supernatural power. After accumulating it to a certain extent, with a thought, a cluster of golden light shone from his body. It was like the radiance of the sun. Wherever the light touched, the white water disappeared like a receding tide. Lord Zhongling stood there and let the golden light shine on him. However, he was not injured at all. He was slightly surprised and said, "You have some ability." Zhang Yan's eyes flickered. He could see that although this person did not move, he had actually used an exquisite method to dissolve the attack. This meant that this opponent not only had strong supernatural power, but he could also control it with ease. Since that was the case, it was not easy to suppress the opponent in terms of supernatural power. In a battle between metamorphosed cultivators, there were many things involved. He raised his hand and punched forward, directly blasting into the opponent's divine will. In an instant, the world spun and the thousands of future shadows from both sides collided. Every battle between the future shadows was equivalent to a real battle between the two. Zhang Yan was a master of both qi and strength, so his attacks were especially fierce. Lord Zhongling was obviously inferior to him in this aspect, so he could only defend passively. In a short period of time, countless shadows of the future were destroyed. However, victory and defeat were not so simple. No matter how much one won, as long as one did not completely destroy the opponent's future, even if only one of the future shadows escaped, thousands of future shadows would be born. Not only would it be difficult for the attacker to achieve victory, but it would also consume more of the divine will. Lord Zhongling was obviously an expert in this field. When he realized that his side was slightly weaker in this battle, he immediately focused on defending and retreating. At the same time, in order to exhaust Zhang Yan as much as possible, one or two shadows of the future managed to escape each time. This was actually very dangerous. If he was not careful, all of his future would be destroyed by Zhang Yan. At that time, even if he had supernatural power, he would not be able to escape death. However, if he could hold on and wait until the opponent's divine will could no longer sustain, then he could counterattack, and there was a high chance that he could defeat the opponent in one go. Sure enough, just as he had expected, Zhang Yan's divine will was originally surging over like a surging tide, but after a long period of fruitless attacks, it slowed down and retreated. Not only that, the aura on his body had also suddenly dropped. Lord Zhongling's spirit was lifted. He immediately felt that the opportunity had come. Instead of retreating, he caught up and took the initiative to attack Zhang Yan's divine will, trying to kill the latter's future shadows. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed. Just now, it was not that he was really out of strength. There was that unknown thing that could travel through space to replenish his vitality at any time, so how could his divine will be exhausted so quickly? It was just that he saw through the opponent's intention, so he played along and lured him to attack. At this time, he also used the method just now, which was to defend and not attack. However, it was too deliberate, so he did not do it to the extreme. Every time, many future shadows escaped. At first, Lord Zhongling did not notice anything. Under normal circumstances, Zhang Yan's divine will could not be that many, so it was very reasonable for him to retreat. However, after several fruitless attacks, he realized that something was wrong. Zhang Yan's qi dynamic seemed to be weakening, but it was still stable and did not go any further. Immediately, he realized the danger. He was also unusually decisive. Before Zhang Yan's counterattack, he did not hesitate to sacrifice the root fruit. Zhang Yan only felt that his body was empty, and he was cut off from the opponent's divine will. He knew that the opponent had realized something was wrong. Seeing that the opponent was using the root fruit to avoid, he immediately seized the opportunity and almost instantly calculated the landing point. Thus, the punch in the real world landed on Lord Zhongling's body without hesitation. Chapter 1604. With Zhang Yan's current transcendence energy, even a fourth tribulation transcendence cultivator would not be able to survive a direct hit from him. However, Lord Zhongling had cultivated for millions of years and his transcendence energy was extremely profound. He was not so easily defeated. His Dharma body emitted a protective aura that blocked the punch. However, he was not completely unscathed. Half of his body cracked and turned into puddles of white water. However, the water did not completely disperse. Zhang Yan knew that if Lord Zhongling dared to summon the root fruit, he must have some tricks up his sleeves. Therefore, he did not stop. After the first punch, he continued to punch. Lord Zhongling's body swayed and suddenly disappeared from his original position. He had used his divine sense and escaped to a faraway place. However, there was not much difference between a mortal molting cultivator's distance and distance. Zhang Yan's attack broke through the void and landed on him again. Boom! The part of Lord Zhongling's body that just now had reassembled shattered again. However, he took the opportunity to move the root fruit away. However, it was not of much use. If a cultivator's root fruit was used by the enemy once, it would be much easier to find it the next time. Zhang Yan sensed that he was moving away, so he turned his spirit and calculated where he was going to land in an instant. He stretched out his finger and a stream of Tai Xian Qing Yi Yuan Han Zhen Gang blasted out and landed on his body. Lord Zhongling was attacked again and again. Before he could recover from his old injuries, new ones came. This time, he seemed to be unable to withstand it. Half of his Dharma body collapsed, leaving only his head and one shoulder. Although he could still rely on his transcendence energy to materialize, Zhang Yan would not give him the chance to do so. Fortunately, he already had a way to deal with it. The four eyes on his face flowed with brilliance. With a bang, a mysterious hole appeared beside him and he was pulled in by a great suction force. Zhang Yaning could sense that in that instant, this person had already gone to another space. His reaction was extremely fast. With a flick of his finger, a ray of sword light flew out and followed him in. Lord Zhongling was originally a Mou fish, a mutated species that could use its scales and feathers to travel through the void at will. Although he was already prepared for this, he didn't know that this divine ability could be used so quickly. He glanced at the big fish that the person had left behind, and he could not help but ponder. The fish was so big, so it should be the original body that it had shed. There were no scales or feathers here, but it could still leap through the void. Then it was either refined into some kind of magic treasure, or it was placed somewhere else. Perhaps the place it escaped to was one of those places. He looked at the place where the mysterious hole disappeared. Since this person had his eyes on the mystic stone, he would eventually return. At most, he would have a chance to breathe. However, he had already calculated where the person was now. Even if they fought again, he would have a great advantage. However, it seemed that this battle would drag on for a long time. Although Elder Peng and the others steered the boat away from the place where the two people fought, they had been paying attention to the battle outside. When they saw Lord Zhongling being swallowed by the mysterious hole, one of the cultivators was puzzled and asked, this person looked like he still had the strength to fight. How did he get killed by Zhang Shangzhen in the blink of an eye? He Xianin stared ahead and said, no, this person is not dead. He just escaped into the void and went to another void. Mei Ruoqing also said, fellow Taoist I didn't expect such a monster to exist in this world. Elder Peng pondered for a while and walked into the cave room in the boat. He took out a Dharma plate and moved it. Rays of spiritual light flashed on it. There were far more than 19 heavens in the Yuhuan heavens. This was only a big realm, and there were many other lower realms. He might not know all of these realms. However, in every realms, there was a 10,000 emptiness ring set up by the Green Jade Palace Master. In fact, this ring was not only for convenience for cultivators to travel, but also for another purpose. No matter which realm, as long as someone achieved mortal shedding, if they did not conceal their chi dynamic, then the Green Jade Palace would know. This way, they could estimate the strength of the realm. Although the other 18 heavens did not know about this, they vaguely sensed it. In particular, the few heavens that had been disloyal for a long time tried to cover it up. The usual method was to let the cultivator break through the realm in the forbidden formation and rely on the Dharma boat to hide. However, when Lord Zhongling escaped, he did not use such a thing to cover up, so it was easy to find out. After watching for a while, he already knew the result. He transmitted his voice to Zhang Yan in the distance, Zhang Shangzhen, I see that this monster is hiding in a lower realm called the Benevolence Realm in Juyuan Heaven. When Zhang Yan heard this, he was slightly moved and said, how do you know where it is, Elder Peng? Elder Peng did not hide the truth from him. He told him the reason and said, I have this star-gazing plate with me. I can roughly calculate its location. I can lend it to you. Logically speaking, this item could not be lent to outsiders. However, Zhang Yan was not a member of the Yuhuan Heavens, and now was not the time to care about rules. Moreover, Elder Peng was a person who dared to break any old rules as long as he thought it was feasible. Otherwise, he would not have allied with outsiders to overthrow the Guardian faction. He held up the Dharma plate and pressed it gently. The item turned into a stream of light and flew out of the boat, flying towards where Zhang Yan was. Zhang Yan waited for the stream of light to come over and held it in his hand. He glanced at it and put it away. He transmitted his voice back, thank you, Elder Peng. This has saved I a lot of effort. Just now, when Lord Zhongling escaped from the mysterious cave, if he insisted on chasing after him, he could still rush in. However, that place was created by someone's supernatural power after all. He might not be able to pass through it. Moreover, he did not know what the situation was on the other side, so he could only follow and explore with his sword light. Later on, he did not feel anything strange in his heart, which meant that the sword light was not lost. Moreover, every sword light was equivalent to one of his clones. He believed that he could keep an eye on this person. According to his original plan, it would not be difficult to find out where the clones went when they returned. However, with this item, he would not have to go through so much trouble. He did not have to wait here and use the 10,000 empty ring to chase after that boundary. Immediately, he turned into a clear light and returned to Cloud 6 from the half-realm. Then, he used the 10,000 empty ring to pass through to the place that Elder Peng told him about. In the benevolence realm, Lord Zhongling stood there. The broken Dharmakaya was gradually gathering without any external disturbances. He thought to himself, just now, that Zhang Yan calculated my root fruit several times, but he did not exhaust his spirit. It seems that this person must have a secret treasure or supernatural power that can replenish his vitality. Thinking about this, he sneered, no matter what method it is, there is a limit. As long as I keep an eye on him, I will eventually exhaust his vitality. Previously, he tried to understand Zhang Yan's past battles with others. Most of the time, he killed his enemies with one strike. This meant that he could calculate the opponent's root fruit in an instant. To be able to do this was impressive, but there was a fact that could not be changed. That was, to calculate the location of the root fruit, it also required a large amount of spirit. Just now, he used the root fruit to escape because he felt that danger was approaching. It could also be said that it was intentional. However, the result was that he had no choice but to temporarily retreat. However, he still thought that this was just a small setback. With the scaled feather, even if the battle was unfavorable, he could escape to another place. Once his mana recovered, he could continue to fight. No matter what, he would not lose. Just as he was thinking about it, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. It was the feeling that his root fruit was being spied on. He immediately knew that the enemy was beside him. However, before he could summon his mana to defend himself, his body that had just recovered was slashed by an oncoming sword gleam. At the same time, there was a loud bang. The void in front of him was broken. Then, he saw Zhang Yan's big sleeves fluttering. He appeared from within and reached out to grab him. In an instant, it was as if the entire world was covered by a big hand. Lord Zhongling's 4 pupils shrank at the same time. He immediately used his spirit to think of a countermeasure. However, he felt that because his Dharmakaya was damaged, there was no better way than to escape. He could only use his mind, and another mysterious hole appeared outside his body. He was sucked into it and disappeared again. Zhang Yan's eyes focused and a few sword gleams followed. He flipped his wrist and took out the star-gazing plate. With a flick of his wrist, he knew where it landed. He kept the item and turned into a ray of light that flew through the 10,000 empty ring. Not long after, he appeared in the void and once again appeared in front of Lord Zhongling. Lord Zhongling did not know how he had missed his tracks. This time, he was very careful. When he saw the sword gleams following him, he immediately used his mana to chase them away. He thought that he was safe, but he did not expect Zhang Yan to catch up with him so quickly. He was shocked and angry. He turned his mind and dissolved the medicine. At the same time, a few doppelgangers appeared and rushed towards him. A clear light flashed outside Zhang Yan's body and a few doppelgangers appeared. They blocked the doppelgangers while he headed towards Lord Zhongling. Lord Zhongling did not retreat this time. Instead, he took out a spell and a whirlpool of water appeared outside. There were tentacles growing out from within. Just now, as they stretched forward, there were rays of sword gleams that crisscrossed and slashed. In an instant, the tentacles were all cut off. At the same time, he saw a pair of eyes flashing in the void. Then, there was a great pressure coming from all directions. It was as if he wanted to freeze his body. Sensing that something was wrong, he used his supernatural power again. With a bang, he fell into the Xian cave again. Zhang Yan drove the sword gleams to follow him. He then took out the star-gazing plate and found that this person had gone to a place called Chunjiang Boundary. However, he had a question. Logically speaking, the few boundaries in Jiuyuan heaven could communicate with each other, but it was only with the help of his scaled feather. Why did this person not go to such a place and use the forbidden formation to stop him? After thinking about it carefully, Dan could not help but smile. He somewhat understood. Obviously, Yang Yugong and the others knew about Lord Zhongling's ability. They must be guarding against this person. The forbidden formation might be a hindrance to him. If that was the case, he could act without worry. With a thought, he immediately turned into a ray of light and chased after him. Chapter 1605. After Lord Zhongling landed in another world's sky, he immediately thought of a way to escape in his divine decree. At first, he had assumed that Zhang Yan had been able to track him down with the help of sword light. But now that he thought about it, he realized that wasn't right. Zhang Yan's speed was simply too fast. If a cultivator's clone was outside, and they weren't in the same world, then it would be impossible for them to know what was going on with their clone. Even he himself didn't have the ability to do so, so there was no reason for Zhang Yan to be able to track him down so quickly. And yet, Zhang Yan had been able to accurately track him down every single time. Although he could not figure out what method it was, cultivators relied on sensing the qi activity to find others. It was not a bad idea to hide the qi activity as much as possible. But before that, he needed to clean up the surrounding sword light. With that in mind, his four eyes seemed to have exchanged positions with each other. In an instant, some kind of change occurred in the space around him, as if it had been wrongly severed. Although the sword light spun around him, it was in a different world and could not touch him no matter what. After temporarily solving this matter, he immediately lowered his qi activity to the lowest. Then, he swallowed a great medicine and condensed his dharmakaya. He strived to recover some strength before Zhang Yan came again. At this moment, Zhang Yan was already coming to where Lord Zhongling was. But he suddenly realized that the person's presence had become much weaker, as if he could disappear at any time. After thinking for a while, he understood that the person had also realized the problem and had begun to consciously conceal his presence. But as long as the qi activity was not completely concealed, it did not make much difference to him. With a thought, he had already escaped through the void. As soon as he stepped on the ground, he waved his sleeve at a certain world. Billions of lightning flashed between heaven and earth. Lord Zhongling did not choose to stay and fight. The moment he appeared, he shifted his mana, released the Xian Kong, and escaped in time. Seeing this, Zhang Yan's eyes flashed. With a thought, a dozen sword lights chased after him. After Lord Zhongling came out from another world, he directly used the first divine power to isolate the sword lights. Then, he shook his hand and threw out countless formation flags. Then, he escaped into it. The best way to conceal one's aura was to use a restriction array. In fact, it was more convenient to use a spiritual boat. However, he never used any spiritual boat except his physical body when traveling between realms. Besides, he had to bear great pressure when traveling between realms, and the spiritual boat couldn't bear it. Therefore, it was useless to take it out since it would only restrict him. After he did so, the sword lights that were circling outside suddenly separated. One part stayed, and the other part flew away. On the other side, Zhang Yan was searching with the star-gazing plate. But this did not go smoothly. Because he was blocked by the restrictive formation, he could not know the specific location of Lord Zhongling from here. However, this didn't mean that he couldn't find this person. After waiting for a long time, a beam of sword light flew over from afar and entered his body. He smiled faintly and said, "The realm of peace, the realm of pure truth." As soon as he spoke, he saw a flash of light, and he was already in the 10,000 empty ring. After passing through several times, he came to another world sky. Here, he still could not sense the existence of the target, but he could clearly see that the sword light that was separated from before was circling around a spell formation. Obviously, Lord Zhongling was hiding in it at the moment. He stepped out, broke through the void, and appeared above the formation. He raised his sleeve and pressed down. In an instant, the qi surged, and a huge hand appeared in the sky and slammed down. After this period of rest, Lord Zhongling had more or less recovered his previous strength. Looking at the gradually enlarging shadow above him, he raised his head and blew out a mouthful of white gas. When it rose high into the sky, it turned into clouds and gathered in one place. It stretched across the sky and temporarily stopped the giant hand. Zhang Yan did not stop. With a change of his mind, countless sword lights rotated in the sky and gathered like a galaxy. Then, they poured down like a rainstorm, and the restrictive formation below was smashed into pieces in an instant. Lord Zhongling used the same trick again. His 4 eyes crossed, and the space was suddenly separated. The sword lights passed through his body and did not cause any damage. But this situation did not last for long. After a breath, his Dharmakaya was split by the sword lights that came after. Speaking of which, he had only used a trick to distort the space. But Zhang Yan could even calculate the root of a cultivator, let alone this kind of change. Lord Zhongling hurriedly gathered his Dharmakaya, but at this moment, he felt his divine will sink, and he once again felt that his shadow of the future was under threat. He could not help but feel surprised, and at the same time a little panicked. Originally, he thought that Zhang Yan should have used up a lot of his energy to hunt him down, and he would not use this method again, but he did not expect that he could still use it. This kind of battle was not his forte. The reason why he dared to make a move earlier was because he was relying on his strategy. Although his magic power had recovered, the divine decree consumed his origin energy. This was not something that could be replenished in a short period of time. Compared to the beginning, he was actually much weaker. If he was slightly careless, he would die. Thinking of this, he did not dare to take any risks. He hurriedly took the root of the fruit and escaped. Although he felt that the root of the fruit had been calculated by the opponent, he had bought some time. He used his mana, opened the mysterious hole, and let himself fall into it, just like just now. Just as he disappeared, another sword light flashed in it. Zhang Yan took out the astrolabe and looked at it. Just like the last time, he did not find the person. Then, he could only wait for the sword light clone to return to get specific information. But he was not in a hurry. After obtaining the secret method of raising this fish, he understood that if Emu fish scale feathers were fully grown, he would have 36 feathers on him. Then, no matter how much his strength increased, it would not exceed this number. This kind of fish was raised in the Xianming pool because it was useful to the disciples of the great underworld patriarch. Since the rest of the fish only had a few feathers left, it was impossible for Lord Zhongling to maintain the original number. It would be good if more than half of them were left. And where the feather was cast, it could only stay there. Even the original owner could not get it back. This also meant that the boundaries that Lord Zhongling could go to were fixed. As long as he could find them one by one and leave a sword light clone in each location, he would be able to know where Lord Zhongling went no matter where he went. After waiting for a while, a sword light came over and merged into his body in the blink of an eye. He smiled slightly, got up, and flew into the 10,000 empty ring. Not long after, he landed in another unfamiliar space. His eyes turned, and he used the sword light to find the whereabouts of his target. Lord Zhongling sensed that he was chasing and did not dare to meet him face to face. Without hesitation, he used the mysterious cave to escape. The many sword lights that had been following him, after splitting off one of them to stay in this space, the rest also went into the mysterious cave. Seeing him leave, Zhang Yan put his hands behind his back and waited patiently. This time, not long after, a sword light flew out from the ring. When it entered his body, he immediately knew where Lord Zhongling had escaped to. He turned around and returned to the ring. In almost a breath's time, he had caught up. However, the result this time was the same as the last time. Lord Zhongling felt that he had no chance of winning, so he fled first again. Zhang Yan did not give up. Since he had met him, he did not plan to let this person go. Moreover, this demonic fish was too cunning. If he did not find a way to get rid of it, he might not have such a good chance in the future. In the following days, Lord Zhongling repeatedly escaped in different spaces. Every time, he would leave behind a few doppelgangers to slow down Zhang Yan. If he lost too much mana, he would consume great medicine to refine it. It was obvious that he was preparing for a long battle of attrition. This strategy was not considered brilliant, but it was one of the more correct choices at the moment. If Zhang Yan continued to chase after him like this, then in the course of the battle and pursuit, his transcendence energy would continue to be consumed. If he gave up halfway, even if he successfully got rid of this enemy, he could find a chance to regain his face in the future. However, if Zhang Yan did not stop, then sooner or later, his transcendence energy would be exhausted, and then he could counterattack. Soon, more than 30 days had passed. The battle was still going on, and it seemed that it was far from the end. Zhang Yan's mana was now bottomless. Even though he had been chasing Lord Zhongling for days, his qi dynamic did not weaken at all. However, his arrangement was about to be completed. This time, he followed Lord Zhongling to a total of 21 worlds. Lord Zhongling basically revolved around these worlds. If 5 worlds, including Juyuan Heaven, were added, there would be about 26 worlds. But considering that this person might leave 1 or 2 escape routes for him, and that the world that secretly cooperated with Yang Yugong might also leave some scales behind, the number should be around 30, no more. Furthermore, he also noticed that Lord Zhongling was actually unable to repeatedly travel to the same world within a short period of time. There would be at least a period of time between each trip. This meant that his realm disappearing technique was not flawless. There were many limitations, and the more he was pressured, the more he would be exposed. Now, he had left sword light doppelgangers in all 21 worlds. No matter where Lord Zhongling appeared, he could rush over at once. In Lord Zhongling's opinion, perhaps the longer the battle dragged on, the more advantageous it would be for him, but it was the same for him. This was because he was the one who had the initiative, and he could decide whether to advance or retreat, instead of being forced to deal with the enemy passively. As he pondered, he did not stop and stepped into another world. However, when he looked around, he was surprised to find that this was Yi Haitian. Lord Zhongling had never been here before. With a thought, he immediately understood that as he chased the demonic fish faster and faster, it finally had to use its original hidden escape route. He thought to himself, if I put it in Yi Haitian, it will be a good idea. Yi Haitian's heavenly lord Ao Shao was a 4th tribulation cultivator, and few dared to cause trouble here. As a demonic fish, Lord Zhongling could hide his identity better here. However, since it could be a escape route, there might be some powerful arrangement here. He had to be careful when he came down. After sensing for a while, he found that the sword light that chased this world was hovering above a world. He knew that it was that place. He crashed into it, broke through the void, and appeared directly where the sword light landed. Chapter 1606. As soon as Zhang Yan stepped into the place where the sword light was, he felt that the spiritual vigor here seemed to be locked by layers of invisible forces. The further he went, the tighter it became. He looked over and saw that at the end of the road, there was a planet that was not very big. As he had expected, there was a large array on it. He thought for a moment. Lord Zhongling must have come here to recover his vitality and get a chance to catch his breath. The longer he stayed here, the longer he would need to recover. Therefore, he had to break the formation as soon as possible. Therefore, he came here to attack Wujue Heaven, so he had prepared many things to break the formation. Some of them were even exchanged with karma points. He lifted his sleeve and took out a jade bottle. He removed the cork, held the bottle, and poured the contents down. Not long after, numerous golden balls the size of stones leaped out from the formation, and they seemed to be connected by a thin thread. When they fell, they lightly trembled and produced a strange sound, similar to the cry of a phoenix. The faster they pierced through the air, the louder the sound became. In the end, they almost converged into one, and when they collided with the invisible restrictive formation, crackling sounds of explosions resounded, and traces of golden flames burst forth. This treasure was known as the Cry of the Phoenix. It contained the golden pill of breaking qi. When it was released, billions of them would surge forth at the same time, one after the other, flowing continuously. They would drill into the weak gaps on their own. Even if they were broken, they would not stop. If the formation was entangled too deeply with them, it would cut off the connection of spiritual vigor, causing the circulation of qi to be shaky, which would then produce more flaws and loopholes. According to the Green Jade Palace, this treasure was made by a secret palace elder with high cultivation. It had always been used to break the formation. It turned out that he was not exaggerating. In just half an hour, the formation below was torn open and a passable gap appeared. When Zhang Yan saw this, he activated his Dharma power even faster. At the same time, he formed hundreds of sword lights and shot them into the formation, trying to find out the situation inside. At this moment, Lord Zhongling was hiding in the depths of the formation. He kept swallowing the jade dew placed here in an attempt to recover his vitality. He had always treated this Earth star as an important base, but he did not trust others. All the formations were arranged by himself. Although he was not an expert in this field, he had been immersed in it for a long time. His arrangements were also quite tight. If outsiders wanted to break in, it would not be as easy as attacking the mountain gate and breaking the formation. However, there was a limit to this, because in the Yi Hai Tian, most of the spiritium were under the control of the Ao brothers and the other aquatic creatures. If he were to overdo it, he would be exposed. Thus, the spiritium had to be accumulated bit by bit over a long period of time. This meant that although the array could hold for a while, if it was attacked for a long period of time, it would have to rely on the spiritual power of the guardian of the array to maintain it. Fortunately, his own advantage lay in the depth of his transcendence energy. Under normal circumstances, he was confident that he could resist any invading enemy here. However, after exchanging blows with Zhang Yan, he was somewhat lacking in confidence. The transcendence energy that the latter had displayed was not inferior to his, so he could only stall for time. Just now, not long after he had stabilized himself, he felt a strong disturbance in the array. He used his senses to check and found out that one after another strange golden pellets were bombarding the array. At the same time, he could feel that the array was being weakened. He snorted and sat down. He placed his hand on the center of the array and infused his transcendence energy into it. He thought, this is just another battle of transcendence energy. However, I have a lot of external herbs here, I don't believe that this person can outlast me. Zhang Yan raised his eyebrow as he saw that the attacking momentum was slightly hindered. Because of the restriction array, he was unable to sense the qi inside the array. If Lord Zhongling took this opportunity to go to a place that he had never been to before, then he would be able to shake him off. Now that the array was even more stable than before, it was clear that someone was controlling it. This meant that the person had not left. This was good news, so he slightly increased his transcendence energy and the golden pellets fell even faster. Both sides attacked and defended, and soon, more than 2 hours passed. However, the situation was in a stalemate. Zhang Yan knew that he had to think of a way to break out of this situation. With a thought, a spiritual light flashed, and an item flew out from his sleeve. On the surface, it looked like a bamboo tube, but inside it was a refined sand called mountain shifting sand. Under the guidance of transcendence energy, it could suddenly become as heavy as a mountain, and then as light as a feather. It was impossible to break the array with just this item, but if it was used with the golden pellets, it would produce a miraculous effect. In fact, he had more items to break the array. If the array still couldn't be broken, then he would come down and show his opponent all of them. At this moment, he pulled out the bamboo tube. Immediately, an endless amount of black sand was blown away by the wind. After it spread out in the sky, he waved his sleeve, and all of the sand changed from its just now appearance and suddenly fell down. In just a few breaths' time, rumbling explosions rang out from below, and one could see that there were holes all over the formation. Although the formation was trying its best to mend the holes, the golden pellets were still able to penetrate through them, seeping into the holes one after another. After he saw this, he decisively decided to increase his strength. So, he stretched out his hand and pressed it down. A large hand pressed down on the restriction formation. Another loud sound came from below, and the restriction formation actually collapsed under this attack. However, at this point, it could be seen that there was not just one restriction formation below, but there were layers upon layers of it. Right now, it was only the outermost layer that had been broken. Even so, his expression didn't change. Since he could break one array now, then he could break 2, 3, or even more, but it would definitely take longer. However, this didn't mean that he had no other way. This was Page C Sky, the territory of his alliance, and he could use external forces. He waved his sleeve and flicked a talisman into the distance. Although Lord Zhongling had been on guard, he didn't expect Zhang Yan to have such a powerful array-breaking treasure. Just now, there was no time to salvage the situation. He could only carefully maintain the remaining array. In order to salvage the situation, he flicked a flame from his finger and lit a copper furnace in front of him. Smoke curled up into the sky. Zhang Yan immediately felt that his vision was separated by a layer of fog, and his senses became abnormally blurry. He knew that the other party was using some sort of technique, so he immediately blew out a mouthful of clear air. However, although the fog dispersed quite a bit, it gathered again in the blink of an eye. It was obvious that the effect was not great. He thought for a while and came up with an idea. With a thought, a demonic image gradually condensed behind him. However, this time it didn't completely materialize. Only a pair of demonic eyes floated in the sky. Using this, he immediately saw through the netherworld, and the scenery below was clearly revealed. He flicked his sleeve and the golden pellets and fine sand moved again, continuing to wear down the array. After 10 breaths of time, there was a sudden movement in the distance. In the void, a door of the array opened wide, and then a ray of clear light passed through it. When it reached the outside, it dispersed and Xiao Wenchao's figure appeared. He first looked down, and his expression instantly turned ugly. Then, he came up and said, "Just now I received the true message, only then did I know that the demon actually set up an array in my Yi Hai Tian. It seems that I have been too negligent." Zhang Yan said, "This demon has some relations with I sect, and has once listened to the teachings of the founding master. His tricks are not comparable to those little demons, so it was inevitable that you didn't notice." Xiao Wenchao shook his head and said, "In the end, it was my negligence." After a pause, he said, "This time, I brought a lot of items to break the array." As he spoke, he took out a big red jade bead from his sleeve and held it in his palm. He said, "At this time, the residence's treasure mountain flood bead can be used to extract spiritual vigor and break the foundation. With your permission, I will break the array with you." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "Then I will have to trouble you, my friend." Xiao Wenchao channeled his powers slightly and threw the bead down. A red ray of light appeared in the sky from top to bottom, as if it brought along a trail of blood, and landed on the top of the formation. After a while, he felt the spiritual vigor from all directions gathering in the bead. Lord Zhongling immediately sensed that something was wrong. The spiritual vigor on Earth's star was already scarce, but now it was being forcibly taken away, causing the original battle formation to weaken. More importantly, he found that Yi Haitian's cultivators had intervened, and he didn't know if there would be more people coming. If he continued to fight, he would only continue to waste his spiritual power, and it would be useless. Since his foundation was calculated, he tried his best to avoid a head-on battle. Now that he saw that the battle was not going well, he immediately thought of retreating. However, the previous battle proved that no matter where he went, Zhang Yan would feel that he was returning to the original path. He pondered for a while and said, "It seems like I can only hide somewhere first. Although it is a little risky, it is worth a try." Outside the array, under the joint attack of Zhang Yan and Xiao Wenchao, the array was peeled off layer by layer. However, the two of them could clearly feel that after the coral bead fell, the array was weakened a lot. This was probably not only because of the treasure, but also because Lord Zhongling was no longer in the mood to fight, so he increased his strength. Just a moment later, the last restriction array was broken, and the fog that was spreading outside also dissipated. The entire Earth star was finally exposed to the two of them. Zhang Yan looked down and sensed his surroundings, but he did not see Lord Zhongling. It seemed that he had hidden somewhere else. He waited for a while, but this time, none of the sword clones returned. This meant that this person didn't go to that place. Because this person had escaped from the forbidden formation first, his sword clones were unable to follow him in time. It was very likely that this person had gone to a place he had never been to before. If this was the case, then this pursuit could only come to an end. However, there was a question. If Lord Zhongling had this escape route, he could have escaped to that place immediately after entering the array. Why did he stay and fight with him? Could it be that he wanted to exhaust his mana? After thinking about it for a while, he looked around and found that something was wrong. The mysterious hole opened up and swallowed everything around it. His sword gleam traveled fearlessly in it, but it did not mean that other things were unaffected. However, there was no damage on this Earth star at all. How was this possible? His eyes flickered. Perhaps, this person did not leave at all, and was still hiding somewhere in this place. Chapter 1607. As soon as Zhang Yan had the thought, he tried to sense if the spiritual lord was hiding in any of the small realms. There were indeed many small realms in Yihaitian, and none of them could hide from Ouyangming. However, he did not notice anything special after looking at them one by one. He asked after some thought, Jinren Shao, how many small realms are there in your realm? Xiao Wenchao had nothing to hide, so he answered, the dragon residence maintains 6 small realms, but you should know that there are places that are not established by the dragon residence. Zhang Yan nodded. He understood. In order to prevent Sky Sea from looking like a pure land for demon cultivators, there were also almighty cultivators cultivating there, even though the sky world was the sole power in the dragon manor. This was also tacitly approved by Ao Shao. It was a way to protect oneself. He asked, are the owners of these small realms here? Of course. If he wasn't going to Wujue heaven, I would have gone with the residence master, Xiao Wenchao replied. Zhang Yan smiled and ignored the derogatory words. He asked, can you invite these scholars over? I have some questions to ask them. Xiao Wenchao pondered and responded, please wait for a moment. He used his finger as a pen and wrote a letter. Subsequently, he released a small dragon from his sleeve and patted its head. The dragon circled around him and flew into the clouds. Zhang Yan chatted with Xiao Wenchao as he waited patiently. With the sword light clones stationed in the void space, he would be able to know immediately if anything happened. There would be no mistakes. After waiting for more than 2 hours, the void suddenly opened up, and an old Taoist with slightly sunken cheeks and weak aura appeared. It could be seen that this person was not far from the end of his lifespan. He came up and bowed, saying, Taoist Master Xiao, may I know why you're looking for me? Xiao Wenchao returned the bow and said to Zhang Yan, this is Jinren and I. Outside of the dragon residence, he has the highest cultivation base. Ni Daoren shook his head and said, I've only been lingering in the first stage in my lifetime of cultivation, so there's no need for you to praise me, spiritual master Xiao. Fellow Ni, I took the liberty to ask you to come here because I'm pursuing a big demon here, but he disappeared after the big formation was breached. Zhang Yan smiled. Taoist Ni stroked his sparse beard. He first looked at Xiao Wenchao, then he asked, fellow friend, are you suspecting that the demon is hiding in the small realm? Zhang Yan nodded. Perhaps so. I'll have to examine it first before I know. I wonder if fellow Taoist will allow me to take a look. Ni Daoren pondered for a while before he responded, it's not impossible, but there's something that I need to make clear to you. Many small realms here were left behind by our predecessors, and we've stopped caring about them since the time of our masters, and we're only waiting for them to return to heaven and earth on their own. Therefore, even if we find anything bad from them, it won't be related to our sect. When Xiao Wenchao heard this, he knew that this person was afraid that he would find an excuse to target him. Thus, he said, don't worry, fellow Taoist. I promise that no matter what the outcome is, I will not implicate your sect in this matter. Old Taoist Ni nodded and reached into his sleeve to take out several talismans. He said, you can use these talismans to enter the small realms that my sect has opened. There are also some realms that were entrusted to my sect to take care of by my fellow Taoists, but the inheritance was cut off, so no one from my sect has been able to visit them. Fellow Taoist, please take them. Zhang Yan accepted the talismans and thanked him. In fact, he didn't have to go through so much trouble if he wanted to enter the small realm. However, it was more appropriate to solve the problem through legitimate means than to barge in forcefully, and he wouldn't be viewed as an enemy by his fellow Taoists. With a thought, he split into more than 10 sword light clones. 6 of them went into the small realm that was opened by the dragon residence, while the rest went to explore the other small realms with the talismans. Then, he said to the 2 of them, "This Lord Zhongling is quite capable, and he has many fiendish demons under his command in this small realm. Please be careful of the sect's safety." Xiao Wenchao knew that his cultivation was not high enough, and he was afraid that he would only cause trouble if he stayed. Moreover, what Zhang Yan said made sense, so he said, "Then, I'll take my leave first." Ni Daoran was also tactful, so he also took his leave. Zhang Yan nodded slightly and watched the 2 of them leave. After waiting for a while, he suddenly sensed something in his heart. With a flash of light in his eyes, he snapped his fingers, and in an instant, thousands of lightning bolts leaped into one of the small realms. In just a moment, a torrent of mana surged out and knocked the lightning bolts away. He smiled faintly. "It's here indeed." Lord Zhongling looked at the lightning bolts coming from above with an unpleasant expression. He knew that his hiding place had been exposed. He relied on Mou's innate ability to escape and hid in this small realm, hoping to deceive his opponent under the concealment of the formation. However, he didn't expect that he would make a mistake, and he didn't expect Zhang Yan to be so cautious that he didn't see him leave with his own eyes. As a result, he didn't manage to escape in the end. After blocking the lightning above him, he parted the waves and jumped out of the small world with a sway of his body. However, as soon as he was outside, he saw countless sword lights coming at him. He hurriedly tried to circulate his energy, but it was immediately calculated. More than half of his body was instantly torn into wisps of white water. However, before he was completely destroyed, he opened the mysterious cave and chose another void space escape to jump in. Zhang Yan focused his gaze, and a few sword gleams that were circling in the sky flew down and entered the Xian cave. Then, he stood where he was without moving. Not long later, a sword gleam flew over and entered his body. Instantly, he knew where Lord Zhongling escaped to again. He shifted his feet, and the conveyance light extended as he rushed in that direction. Not long after, he stepped out of the myriad empty realm ring. He came to the boundary. At this moment, he looked up and realized that Lord Zhongling didn't escape this time. Instead, he stayed there. He said, "You're not going to escape again?" Lord Zhongling didn't answer. Instead, he looked at Zhang Yan with a complicated gaze. From the beginning of the battle until now, Yi Futian's qi activity had been maintained, and his mana seemed to be endless. It was very likely that this was the benefit of the Xian stone. In fact, he already knew that his chances of obtaining the Xian stone were not high. How could the person chosen by the Tai Ming patriarch be killed so easily? But this was the only way for him to reach the upper realm. Even if he had to wait for 1,000,000 years, he had to give it a try. But just now, it proved that he had no chance from the beginning to the end. If this dragged on, he was afraid that he would be the first to fall. So, it was better to stop the battle now. As for escaping to the void primordial sea to get rid of the danger, he didn't even consider it. Because since he met that person 1,000,000 years ago, he couldn't take the initiative to do this. Zhang Yan could sense it as well, and knew that this person was preparing to fight a final battle with him. Nodding his head, he decided that it was time to put an end to this battle. He waved his sleeve, causing countless bolts of lightning to appear out of nowhere, filling the sky. Then, he punched out. Lord Zhongling leaped into the sky. With a surge of mana, his Dharmakaya dispersed and turned into endless white water. With a silver glow, it poured down from the sky. In the next moment, the two masses of qi dynamics collided with each other. In an instant, they collided for thousands of times. Even though it was only in the virtual sky, there were still repercussions that scattered onto the ground. The violent spiritual vigor caused tsunamis and flash floods. After Zhang Yan swung his fist, he attacked Lord Zhongling with his divine will. Even though the latter kept moving the root fruit to avoid it, Zhang Yan found it again. Soon, no matter how hard he tried to move the root fruit, it was useless. His divine will was continuously depleted, and his resistance became weaker and weaker. Finally, after the thousands of shadows of the future were destroyed, he was hit by a punch that had been thrown at him. The sound of glass shattering could be heard in the air. Lord Zhongling's body had countless fine cracks. He knew that he was about to die. His face was filled with unwillingness and sorrow. At the same time, there seemed to be some kind of indignation. At this moment, Zhang Yan had already retracted his attack and was watching quietly in the sky. Lord Zhongling's qi dynamic continued to fall. Not long after, it completely dissipated. At this moment, a huge mysterious hole that had never been seen before suddenly appeared outside of his body. It swallowed all the broken spiritual vigor around him. However, there was an afterimage of him that struggled and did not leave. Zhang Yan could see that it was a shadow of the past that was forced to stay in the present world. He did not need to care about it as it would not last long. However, it was obvious that the other party had something to say. As expected, the afterimage looked up and said coldly, "Do you think that you can use the mysterious stone to go to the upper state? Ha, if you think that's the case, then you're gravely mistaken. What should be encountered will eventually be encountered. No matter what, you can't escape from it. I believe it won't be long before you understand what I'm saying." After he finished speaking, he smiled strangely. His figure was finally sucked into the mysterious hole. Then, the mysterious hole suddenly closed and the world returned to silence. Although Zhang Yan heard these words, he was not moved at all. How could he be shaken by a few vague words when he was able to cultivate to such a state? Perhaps this demonic fish really knew something. However, no matter how difficult or dangerous it was, he only needed to face it calmly. It was not worth being afraid of it. Now that this person was dead, it was easy for the Jindi sect to deal with him. However, this was a matter for the future. The key now was that he finally had time to help Elder Peng and the others. I wonder how Wujue Heaven is doing now. He thought for a while and did not move immediately. Instead, he stood in the sky and adjusted his breath, recovering the mana that was used up in the previous battle. Although Lord Zhongling's mana was strong, he was still the same as him. He only had the cultivation of the third stage. Since the root fruit was calculated, there was almost no chance for him to turn the tables. However, it was different for those enlightenment cultivators. Due to the root fruits turning, he might have to kill them several times before he could really kill them. However, as long as Yang Yugong did not have powerful reinforcements like Lord Zhongling, the result of the battle was already predictable. After standing there for 7 days, he came out of his meditation. With a thought, a clear light shot up and went into the boundary ring. In the blink of an eye, he returned to the half-world. Chapter 1608. Zhang Yan identified the location of the aura, and with a flash of light, he returned to the boat. Ever since he left with Lord Zhongling, Elder Peng and the rest had been on high alert. Now that he had returned alone, they welcomed him happily and said, "Sage Zhang, how is the demon?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Lord Zhongling is dead. You can rest assured." Elder Peng could not help but reveal a joyful expression. Because of Lord Zhongling, they had always felt like there was a thorn in their backs. With the demon's death, they had resolved an extremely troublesome external threat. He cheered, "With the demon's death, it seems like Yang Yugong and the others have lost an arm." Zhang Yan said, "Not only that, if I's guess is correct, Yang Yugong and the rest relied on the demon's scale feather to travel freely to different worlds. After the demon's death, the spiritual vigor on the scale feather must have dissipated." The jade booklet he had obtained had detailed descriptions. When cultivators roamed the void, if they wanted to borrow the power of the Mo feather fish, then they had to protect the lives of these demonic fish. It was precisely because of this that the Great Kuan's cave abode had been specially prepared with Xianming water so that they could survive. However, the scales and feathers alone were useless. Elder Peng's heart skipped a beat. He looked over and said, "In other words, Yang Yugong and the rest have no way out?" Zhang Yan said, "That's right. However, the spiritual vigor of the scale feather will not dissipate in a day or two. I'm afraid it will take some time. Besides, we still have to prevent it from escaping into the void." If we are more careful, we might be able to kill everyone. Elder Peng's expression turned solemn. He lowered his head and thought for a while. It seems like we have to make some adjustments to the previous arrangements. He looked up abruptly and called the deacon Daoist who was standing in the distance to greet Zhang Yan. He then apologized and went to the side to call Feng Lan and Guan Longzhao over to discuss how to arrange the follow-up battle. Zhang Yan didn't see He Xianyin and Mei Ruoqing here. He guessed that they had joined the battle. Previously, when he was in this half-world, he could directly look into Wujue heaven, but now it seemed to be covered by a layer of fog. He asked the Daoist in charge, "How is the battle now?" The deacon said, "Shangzhen, please come and take a look." He walked a few steps and arrived before a jade. He gently waved his sleeve and the image of the inner realm appeared. Zhang Yan looked over, and he saw energy and qi colliding everywhere. Moreover, there were numerous grand rays of light moving and leaping to and fro, and everywhere they passed, the heavens and the earth collapsed and the stars exploded into pieces. He shook his head. There were at least 10 enlightenment cultivators fighting here. After this battle, there would probably not be many places left in this realm that could accommodate cultivators. The deacon Daoist then said, "It's still too early to determine the winner of the Wuzhu heavenly battle. You really know that when cultivators of Duzhu heavens fight, they won't be able to determine the winner without exhausting all of their mana and vitality." He waved his hand again, and the light on the jade disc disappeared. Everything disappeared, and he said, "Now, we can only observe for a few dozen breaths at a time. If we look for too long, Yang Yugong and the others will sense it. For example, that layer of fog was created by him to hide us." Zhang Yan nodded slightly. He said, "I will go to the inner hall to cultivate. If there is a change in the battle, call me." He guessed that the true strength of Yang Yugong and the others was not limited to what they had shown. There must be a lot of tricks that they hadn't used yet. This battle could still be fought, and it wouldn't be strange for it to continue for a few more years. He didn't have to wait here for nothing. He could go back to cultivate first. The deacon thought that he needed to regulate his breath after a battle, and hurriedly said, "Shangzhen, don't worry. If there is any change here, I will inform you in time." Zhang Yan left the main hall, turned around, and returned to the residence that was arranged for him. He threw out a set of formation flags and scattered them around, isolating the inside from the outside. Then, he sat down on the praying mat. He looked forward for a moment, and the profound stone appeared again. With a thought, Yuan Qi continuously flowed into his body. He could feel that the growth of vitality and mana was gradually slowing down. It was not as good as before. After cultivating for a period of time, he might need to use the circulation technique. However, he didn't forget the feeling from before. Especially after hearing Lord Zhongling's words, he became even more vigilant. Even if this person was boasting, he wouldn't speak without thinking. Therefore, he decided that after this matter was over, he would go to Yu Kuan and Ning Zhao and ask for help. After thinking, he cleared his thoughts and calmed his mind. Then, he entered the Ji Ding temple. He sat there for 2 years. During this period of time, no one came to disturb him. It wasn't until a familiar aura was approaching that he sensed it and opened his eyes. He waved his sleeves and removed the formation flags arranged outside. He said, "Fellow Daoist, come in and talk." The deacon Daoist walked in and said, "Shangzhen, the outcome of Wujue heaven is about to be decided. Elder Peng ordered me to come here and invite Shangzhen to come and discuss." Zhang Yan nodded, stood up from his seat, and followed the deacon Daoist to the hall. Elder Peng was already waiting there. When he saw him, he came up to greet him and said, "Fellow Daoist Zhang, after listening to what you said, I used an instrument to secretly check. The spiritual vigor of the middle realm of Jueyuan heaven is indeed dissipating. Yang Yugong and the rest can no longer return to their own world through that place. However, they seem to have noticed it." Zhang Yan was not surprised. He said, "Lord Zhongling and Yang Yugong were originally not on the same side, but because of your side's influence, they joined forces. Both sides help each other, but at the same time, they are also on guard against each other. Yang Yugong and the others could sense it, maybe they left some arrangements on the border. Elder Peng thought about it and agreed, this is very possible. Although Yang Yugong and the rest did not show any signs of losing, they obviously have the intention to retreat. I originally wanted to wait for them to consume more vitality before making a move. However, if this is the case, we have to make a move earlier. Zhang Yan asked, what is Elder Peng's plan? Elder Peng Daoren said, now, apart from fellow Daoist, all the people that can be sent out have been sent out. However, they still can't take down Yang Yugong and the rest. Therefore, I can only ask fellow Daoists to make a move. Zhang Yan thought for a while and said, I might be able to kill one or two of them. However, if the rest see that the situation is not good, they will definitely try to escape. I wonder if Elder Peng has made any arrangements. Elder Peng Daoren said, fellow Daoist, don't worry. I have an instrument that I brought out from Green Jade Palace. There are two of them. One of them has been placed in Wujue Heaven. As long as I bring the other one over, I can seal the world for a short period of time. As he spoke, he took out a golden bracelet with 9 rings and handed it over. Fellow Daoist, please keep it well. Zhang Yan took it and looked at it for a while before putting it into his sleeve. He said, since Elder Peng has arranged everything, then I will make a trip. Elder Peng cupped his hands and said, then I'll leave it to you, fellow Daoist. Zhang Yan nodded. With a wave of his sleeve, he got out of the boat and floated into the myriad empty world ring. In Wujue Heaven, the two sides had been fighting for several years. Almost everyone had used up their last Dharma body. At this point, everyone became even more careful. Although they were still fighting back and forth, their priority was to stay alive. After that, they would look for an opportunity to kill the enemy. However, at this moment, a powerful aura surged into the world. The people fighting on both sides looked over at the same time. As a beam of 5-colored radiance flashed past, they saw a young Daoist in a black robe step through the void. His sleeves fluttered as he appeared in the sky. When Ao Xiao and the others saw him, they could not help but feel invigorated. On the other hand, the people on Yang Yogong's side had solemn expressions. Lord Zhongling had promised that he would try to delay Zhang Yan. However, the latter had still appeared here. This meant that Lord Zhongling had either been defeated or had died. Zhang Yan had previously killed a cultivator in the second stage of perception. Now that he had joined the battle, it would be very disadvantageous to them. Zhang Yan looked around and his gaze quickly fell on Zhu Yu. He did not say anything. He only lifted his sleeve and pointed a finger at Zhu Yu. At this moment, the world seemed to freeze. There was no longer any distance between the two sides. It was as if everything had been stripped away. In the next moment, the finger had already landed on Zhu Yu's forehead. A look of regret appeared in the latter's eyes. Zhang Yan did not take another look at him and turned around. Behind him, the giant carriage's body emitted cracking sounds as tiny cracks spread across its body. After a few breaths of time, it collapsed into countless fragments of light and fell into a profound hole that had suddenly opened up. Everyone present revealed shocked expressions, especially the people on Yang Yogong's side. They found it hard to believe that a great cultivator who was extremely close to the fourth tribulation would be killed so easily in front of them. Heavenly Lord Hua An's eyes flickered. He secretly circulated his magic power and his body turned into a ray of clear light as he flew out. With a rumble, he crashed into the sky wall, attempting to break through the void and escape to outer space. Although the Heavenly Lord and the others had noticed his actions, they did not extend their hands to stop him. This was because this action was undoubtedly cutting off his path of survival. If a cultivator of enlightenment were to fight with his life on the line, it would be extremely difficult to deal with. If they were unlucky, they might lose their lives. At this point, they felt that victory was already decided, so there was no need for them to do so. However, the result was unexpected. Under Heavenly Lord Hua An's actions, there was only a rumbling echo, and he was unable to break through the heaven and earth barrier. His body paused, and his expression could not help but become extremely ugly. Just now, Yang Yugong did not move at all, as if he had expected this result. He sighed and said, "Heavenly Lord Huan, the heaven and earth barrier has been sealed. You won't be able to leave alone." Han Su looked at Zhang Yan's figure in the sky, and her eyes revealed incomparable fear. At the same time, there was a trace of imperceptible regret. She gritted her teeth and said, "We can trap him for a while, but we can't trap him for long. As long as we block him for a while, we still have a chance to escape." Zhang Yan looked down from above, yet he didn't say anything. He just stretched out his hand, and surging profound energy swept out. After a short moment, an enormous palm that could overturn the heavens had appeared, and it pressed down towards Yang Yugong and the others.